From a stray pup who slipped into World War I trenches and rose to sergeant, to a bow-tied penguin who inspects soldiers with a colonel's swagger, this is a calm yet extraordinary journey that we're about to embark on, lasting over 3 hours. We'll begin with how that fearless dog warned men of gas attacks and move deeper into why a Norwegian guard snaps to attention before a waddling bird at Edinburgh Castle. So put your phone or television remote to the side, dim the lights, and please make sure to like the video, subscribe, and let me know where you are listening from in the comments. Now, let's begin. Living badges with brass. Why armies promote animals. There's something wonderfully absurd about opening a military personnel file and finding a photograph of a goat wearing sergeant stripes. Yet for centuries, armies around the world have been doing precisely this, awarding ranks, promotions, and even medals to creatures who can't salute back, who have no concept of military hierarchy, and who are far more interested in their next meal than their next mission. The tradition runs deeper than mere whimsy. When you watch a regimental mascot standing at attention during morning parade, their handler's boots polished to mirror brightness beside hooves or paws, you're witnessing something that speaks to humanity's oldest partnership with animals. The soft clink of ceremonial chains, the gentle snort of a horse, the distant sound of drums echoing across dusty parade grounds, these sounds have accompanied human warfare for millennia. But why ranks? Why not simply keep these animals as beloved pets or working companions? The answer lies in military culture itself, where everything must have its place in the grand hierarchy. A mascot without rank is just a pet. A mascot with rank becomes part of the unit's identity, its living embodiment of spirit and tradition. The earliest recorded instances trace back to the 18th century, when Welsh regiments began formally appointing goats to carry regimental honours. These weren't arbitrary decisions made by sentimental colonels. They were deliberate choices that reflected the animal's role in unit morale and identity. A goat that had marched with the regiment through 3 campaigns deserved recognition just as much as any soldier. Napoleon's armies took this concept further, with dogs receiving battlefield promotions for acts of valour. These weren't honorary titles handed out at peaceful ceremonies. They were field promotions earned in the smoke and chaos of actual combat. Imagine the scene. Cannons thundering in the distance, the acrid smell of gunpowder hanging heavy in the air, and a French officer solemnly pinning makeshift stripes to a dog's collar after the animal had carried messages through enemy fire. The distinction between different types of military animal ranks matters more than you might think. Honorary ranks are ceremonial. Think of a regimental goat who appears at parades and official functions, living a relatively comfortable life between brass-buttoned appearances. Their rank acknowledges their symbolic importance, but doesn't reflect operational duties. Working animal promotions are different entirely. These are earned through service, sometimes dangerous service. A mine detection dog promoted to corporal has genuinely saved lives. A messenger pigeon, elevated to sergeant, has flown through hostile territory, carrying crucial intelligence. Their ranks reflect real contribution to military operations, not just morale. Then there are the full ceremonial titles, the rarest and most prestigious. These animals don't just wear the insignia, they receive the full honors of their rank. They have service records, they attend formal ceremonies, and when they die, they receive military funerals with all the dignity accorded to human service members. The modern military has formalized what was once ad hoc tradition. The United States Department of Defense now mandates that military working dogs hold ranks 1 level above their handlers. This isn't sentiment, it's practical psychology. A handler is less likely to abuse or neglect an animal that technically outranks them. It's a clever solution to an age-old problem. How do you ensure proper care for creatures who can't file complaints or demand better treatment? The sensory experience of these ceremonies carries its own magic. Picture a dawn ceremony at a military base, morning mist rising from manicured grass, the soft leather scent of polished gear mingling with the earthy smell of hay from the stables. The low rumble of drums begins, a rhythm that seems to emanate from the earth itself. Officers in dress uniform stand at attention, their brass buttons catching the early light, while beside them stands a goat in miniature military regalia, or a dog wearing a collar adorned with actual military insignia. These aren't just quaint traditions preserved in amber. They're living customs that continue to evolve. Modern military units still promote their mascots, still hold ceremonies where animals receive medals and rank insignia. The Australian Defence Force recently promoted 2 camels to Lance Corporal. The British Army continues its centuries-old tradition of goat majors. American military bases still witness the sight of dogs receiving Purple Hearts for injuries sustained in combat. The psychology behind these promotions reveals something profound about human nature. We need our partners to have status, to be recognized, to matter in ways that go beyond mere utility. A horse that carries supplies is valuable. A horse that carries supplies and holds the rank of sergeant is a comrade. The difference isn't just semantics, it's emotional, practical, and deeply human. As you settle deeper into this story, imagine the weight of all those tiny medals, the soft jingle of miniature rank insignia, the gentle breathing of animals who have no idea they're part of something larger than themselves. They serve not because they understand duty or honor, but because they've bonded with humans who do. And in return, those humans have found ways to honor that service, to make it official, to write it into the permanent record of military history. The tradition continues because it works. Because there's something about a sergeant's stripes on a dog's collar that transforms both the animal and the unit it serves. Because in the strange, rigid world of military hierarchy, these living badges of honor remind everyone that loyalty, courage, and service come in many forms, some of them on 4 legs, some with wings, some with an inability to salute, but a perfect ability to serve. Sergeant Stubby, America's first dog of the line. The story of America's most decorated war dog begins not in a kennel or training facility, but on a college campus in New Haven, Connecticut, where a young private named Robert Conroy was learning to march in formation. It was 1917, and the world was tearing itself apart in the muddy trenches of Europe. On the Yale University drill field, where future officers practiced their commands and enlisted men learned to move as one, a small brindle bull terrier mix wandered into history. No one knows exactly where Stubby came from. He simply appeared one day among the marching men of the 102nd Infantry Regiment, a short-legged, stocky dog with one ear that stood upright and another that flopped over his bright, intelligent eyes. The soldiers were initially amused by his presence, but amusement turned to affection when they realized the dog was actually learning their drill routines. He would sit at attention during inspections, follow commands with surprising precision, and even seem to understand the bugle calls that structured military life. Private Conroy, barely 20 years old himself, became the dog's unofficial handler. In the evenings, when the Connecticut air carried the scent of autumn leaves and the distant sound of chapel bells, Conroy would work with Stubby, teaching him to respond to whistle signals and basic commands. The dog's intelligence was remarkable. He learned to distinguish between different uniforms, to recognize the various calls of military bugles, and even to perform a crude version of a salute by placing his right paw over his eye. When orders came for the 102nd to ship out to France, Conroy faced a dilemma. Military regulations strictly forbade pets or mascots on troop transports. But Stubby had become more than a pet to the men of the 102nd, was their good luck charm, their reminder of home, their symbol of American pluck and determination. The decision to smuggle him aboard the USS Minnesota was made collectively, though Conroy would bear the responsibility if they were caught. The Atlantic crossing in early 1918 was a study in creative concealment. Stubby spent most of the voyage hidden in coal bins and storage compartments, emerging only for clandestine walks on deck during the darkest hours of night. The men took turns feeding him scraps from their own meager rations, and more than one soldier shared his blanket with the dog during the cold nights at sea. By the time they reached France, Stubby had learned to stay silent on command, a skill that would serve him well in the trenches. The Western Front in 1918 was a landscape from humanity's darkest nightmares. Miles of trenches scarred the French countryside, separated by tangles of barbed wire and shell-pocked earth that had been churned into a moonscape of mud and death. The air carried the constant smell of cordite and decay, punctuated by the distant thunder of artillery that never seemed to stop. Into this hell, Stubby marched with the 102nd Infantry, his short legs carrying him through conditions that would break many humans. But Stubby's real talents emerged under fire. His keen hearing, developed through generations of breeding that selected for alertness and courage, made him an early warning system for incoming artillery. He could detect the whistle of approaching shells several seconds before human ears picked up the sound, giving his unit precious moments to take cover. More remarkably, he seemed to understand the difference between incoming and outgoing fire, reacting only to shells that posed actual danger to his position. The dog's most famous exploit came during a German gas attack near Chemin-des-Dames. Chemical warfare was the particular horror of the First World War, invisible death that could creep through trenches and overwhelm entire units before they realized the danger. Stubby's sensitive nose detected the chlorine gas before any human could smell it. He raced through the trenches, barking frantically and nipping at sleeping soldiers to wake them. His warning gave the men time to don their gas masks and likely saved dozens of lives. But Stubby's courage extended beyond passive warnings. On one occasion, he actually captured a German spy who had infiltrated American lines. The infiltrator, dressed in an American uniform but carrying maps of Allied positions, made the mistake of trying to befriend the dog. Stubby's training had taught him to distinguish between American and foreign accents. And something about the stranger's voice and scent triggered his protective instincts. He grabbed the man's leg and held on until American soldiers arrived to make the arrest. The formal recognition of Stubby's service came after the Battle of Château Thierry in the summer of 1918. The 102nd had fought with distinction in the massive offensive that helped turn the tide of the war, and casualties had been heavy. As the regiment regrouped and counted their losses, the commanding officer made an unprecedented decision. In a ceremony held in a field still scarred by shell craters, with the distant sound of artillery serving as a grim backdrop, Stubby was promoted to sergeant. The promotion wasn't merely ceremonial. Stubby received actual sergeant's stripes, sewn onto a custom-made chamois coat that also bore his service ribbons and unit insignia. More importantly, he was entered into the official records of the 102nd Infantry Regiment as Sergeant Stubby, making him the first dog in American military history to receive a field promotion based on combat service. The war's end brought new challenges for Stubby. The armistice of November 11, 1918, was celebrated with church bells and brass bands. But for soldiers who had lived through months of hell, the transition to peace was jarring. Stubby seemed to understand that something fundamental had changed. He no longer tensed at the sound of distant thunder, no longer automatically sought cover when metal objects fell. The hypervigilance that had kept him and his unit alive in the trenches gradually faded as they prepared for the journey home. The return to America transformed Stubby from a military working dog into a national celebrity. The press seized on his story with enthusiasm, and he became a symbol of American courage and determination. He led parades through major cities, his medals and service ribbons glinting in the sunlight as crowds cheered. At Georgetown University, where Robert Conroy was studying law, Stubby became the unofficial mascot of the football team, performing his salute routine at halftime shows to thunderous applause. But perhaps the most touching aspect of Stubby's post-war life was his continued service to veterans. He spent countless hours at veterans' hospitals, somehow understanding that these men who bore invisible wounds needed the same kind of comfort he had provided in the trenches. Nurses reported that soldiers who had been unresponsive to human interaction would brighten visibly when Stubby entered their rooms, his presence a living reminder that they had not been forgotten. When Sergeant Stubby died in 1926, he was given a full military funeral, complete with an honor guard and a bugler playing taps. His obituary appeared in major newspapers across the country, and his taxidermied remains were eventually displayed in the Smithsonian Institution, where they remain today, a testament to the bond between humans and animals in the crucible of war. The legacy of Sergeant Stubby extends far beyond his individual service. He established the template for military working dogs, proving that animals could serve not just as mascots or morale boosters, but as genuine contributors to military operations. His story demonstrates that courage and loyalty know no species boundaries, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. A stray dog who wandered onto a college drill field and into the annals of military history. Sergeant Bill, the Saskatchewan goat who heard shells. In the autumn of 1914, as Canada rallied to answer Britain's call to arms, a young billy goat named Bill was living a peaceful life on a farm near Broadview, Saskatchewan. He was a sturdy animal with the characteristic beard and curved horns of his breed, spending his days grazing in fields that stretched to the horizon under the vast prairie sky. He had no way of knowing that his quiet existence was about to be transformed by the greatest conflict in human history. The men of the 5th Battalion, Western Cavalry, Canadian Expeditionary Force, were farmers and ranchers themselves, drawn from the same Saskatchewan communities where Bill had been born. When they established their training camp near Broadview, it was perhaps inevitable that local wildlife would become part of their daily routine. But Bill was different from the other farm animals that wandered through the camp. He seemed drawn to the soldiers, following them as they went about their duties, standing quietly at the edge of formation during drill practice. Private Will Curl, a young man from Regina with a fondness for animals, was the first to notice Bill's unusual behavior. The goat would appear at reveille, standing at attention with remarkable discipline for a creature that had never been trained. When the men marched, Bill would follow at a respectful distance, his hooves creating a steady rhythm on the hard-packed earth. During evening mess, he would position himself near the cooking fires, not begging for food but simply observing the human rituals of military life. The decision to make Bill the battalion's official mascot came gradually, as these things often do. One morning, the commanding officer found the goat standing guard at the entrance to the officers' quarters, his head held high, his eyes alert. There was something almost human about his posture, a dignity that suggested he understood the importance of his position. From that moment, Bill became an unofficial member of the 5th Battalion, though no one quite knew what to do with him when orders came to deploy to Europe. Military regulations were clear about livestock accompanying troops overseas, but Bill had become more than livestock to the men of the 5th. He was their link to home, their reminder of the Saskatchewan prairies they were leaving behind. The decision to smuggle him aboard the transport ship was made collectively, though it would fall to Private Curl to ensure Bill's concealment during the Atlantic crossing. The voyage to England in the spring of 1915 was Bill's first experience of the wider world beyond the Saskatchewan plains. Hidden in cargo holds and exercised only during the darkest hours of night, he adapted to shipboard life with remarkable stoicism. The men took turns caring for him, sharing their rations and makeshift bedding. By the time they reached Southampton, Bill had learned to move silently through the ship's corridors and to remain perfectly still when strangers approached. Training in England gave Bill his first taste of military discipline. The 5th Battalion was stationed at Shorncliffe Camp, where Canadian forces prepared for the horrors of trench warfare. Bill participated in these preparations with enthusiasm that amazed his handlers. He learned to recognize the sound of different bugle calls, to distinguish between officers and enlisted men, and to respond appropriately to various commands. His natural intelligence, combined with his apparent desire to please, made him an ideal military mascot. The most remarkable aspect of Bill's training was his response to artillery practice. While other animals fled from the sound of guns, Bill seemed to find comfort in the routine thunder of practice firing. He would stand calmly during bombardments, his ears alert but his posture relaxed. The men began to joke that Bill was the only one among them who actually enjoyed the sound of gunfire. But this apparent fearlessness would prove crucial when they reached the front lines. The journey to France, in late 1915, brought Bill face to face with the reality of modern warfare. The 5th Battalion was assigned to the Ypres salient, that notorious bulge in the Allied lines, where the British and Commonwealth forces held a precarious position surrounded on 3 sides by German trenches. The landscape was a study in desolation, trees stripped bare by shellfire, fields churned into muddy chaos, and the constant smell of cordite and decay hanging in the air. Bill's first major contribution to the war effort came during a German artillery barrage in the winter of 1916. The men of the 5th were huddled in their trenches, waiting for the bombardment to end, when Bill began exhibiting strange behavior. He would stand at attention for several seconds, his ears pricked forward, then suddenly dash to the nearest cover. The men initially thought he was simply frightened, but they soon realized that Bill was consistently taking cover several seconds before they could hear incoming shells. The goat's remarkable hearing, honed by generations of prairie life, where predators might approach from any direction, made him an early warning system more accurate than any human sentry. He could detect the whistle of approaching artillery when it was still too faint for human ears, giving his unit precious seconds to take cover. Word of Bill's abilities spread through the battalion, and soon soldiers from other units were requesting that Bill be positioned near their sections during expected attacks. But Bill's service went beyond passive warning. On one memorable occasion, he actually participated in the capture of German prisoners. A raiding party had brought back several enemy soldiers for interrogation, and Bill was assigned to help guard them in a temporary holding area. When one of the prisoners attempted to escape, Bill blocked his path and held him at bay until human guards could respond. The incident earned Bill official recognition and his first promotion to the rank of Lance Corporal. The promotion ceremony was held in a communication trench behind the front lines, with the distant sound of artillery providing a grim backdrop. Bill stood at attention while his commanding officer pinned makeshift stripes to his collar, and the assembled soldiers cheered despite the constant danger of enemy snipers. The ceremony was photographed, and the images were later sent home to Saskatchewan newspapers, where Bill became a local celebrity. Bill's military career was not without controversy. His natural goat instincts occasionally conflicted with military discipline, leading to 2 courts-martial for what the official records describe as conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer. The first incident involved Bill's consumption of an entire mess tent, including the canvas walls and several important documents. The second was his unauthorized romantic encounter with a French farmer's goat, which caused a diplomatic incident when the farmer demanded compensation for his animal's honor. Both courts-martial were conducted with full military ceremony, with Bill standing before a panel of officers while charges were read. The proceedings were somewhat hampered by the defendant's inability to understand human speech, but military justice required proper procedure. In both cases, Bill was found guilty but received suspended sentences, largely due to his outstanding service record and the testimony of soldiers whose lives he had saved. The Battle of Vimy Ridge, in April 1917, marked the pinnacle of Bill's military career. The 5th Battalion was part of the Canadian Corps assault on the German-held ridge, and Bill accompanied them into one of the most significant battles in Canadian military history. As the men advanced across no man's land, Bill moved with them, his keen senses alert for the sound of enemy fire. When German machine guns opened up, Bill's early warnings helped several sections reach cover in time to avoid casualties. During the battle, Bill demonstrated courage that would have been remarkable in a human soldier. When a wounded Canadian soldier fell in the open ground between the lines, Bill positioned himself as a shield, using his body to protect the man from further enemy fire until stretcher bearers could reach him. The incident was witnessed by multiple soldiers and resulted in Bill's promotion to full sergeant, making him one of the highest-ranking GOATs in military history. The war's end brought bittersweet emotions for Bill and his human comrades. The armistice of November 11, 1918, was celebrated with cautious joy, but for soldiers who had lived through 4 years of hell, the transition to peace was complex. Bill seemed to understand that something fundamental had changed. He no longer tensed at the sound of distant thunder, no longer automatically sought cover when metal objects fell. The hypervigilance that had kept him and his unit alive in the trenches gradually faded as they prepared for the journey home. The return to Canada transformed Bill from a military working goat into a national symbol. He was awarded 3 medals for his service: the Victory Medal, the British War Medal, and the Canadian General Service Medal. The ceremonies were held with full military honors, and Bill's story was featured in newspapers across the country. He became a symbol of Canadian courage and determination, proof that heroism could emerge from the most unlikely sources. Bill's post-war life was spent in comfortable retirement at a farm in Saskatchewan, where he lived surrounded by the prairie landscape that had shaped his early years. Visitors would come to see the famous war goat, and Bill would perform his military salute routine with dignity befitting his rank. He died peacefully in 1922, and his remains were preserved and displayed in the Saskatchewan Military Museum, where they serve as a reminder of the unlikely heroes who emerged from the Great War. The legacy of Sergeant Bill extends beyond his individual service. He established the tradition of Canadian military mascots, proving that animals could serve not just as morale boosters, but as genuine contributors to military operations. His story demonstrates that courage and loyalty know no species boundaries, and that sometimes the most ordinary creatures can rise to extraordinary heights when circumstances demand it. Corporal Jackie Baboon in khaki. In the rolling hills of the Transvaal, where the South African veld stretches endlessly under vast skies, a young baboon named Jackie was living the typical life of his species, foraging for food, establishing social hierarchies, and navigating the complex relationships that govern baboon society. He was a CHESTY baboon, the largest of the baboon species, with the intelligence and adaptability that had allowed his kind to thrive across southern Africa for millennia. He had no way of knowing that his life was about to intersect with human history in the most remarkable way. The year was 1913, and Albert Marr, a young South African farmer, was walking his property near Pretoria when he came across a group of baboons that had been raiding his crops. Most farmers would have driven them off or worse, but Marr was fascinated by one particular juvenile male who seemed bolder and more curious than the others. Instead of fleeing when humans approached, this baboon would stand his ground, studying the intruders with bright, intelligent eyes that suggested a mind capable of complex thought. The circumstances that led to Jackie becoming Marr's companion were tragically typical of the era. The baboon troop had been decimated by farmers protecting their crops, and Jackie, still young enough to be dependent on his mother, was left orphaned and alone. Marr, moved by a combination of compassion and curiosity, decided to take the young baboon home. What followed was an extraordinary process of domestication that would transform a wild animal into one of the most unusual soldiers in military history. Jackie's intelligence became apparent almost immediately. Within weeks of joining Marr's household, he had learned to recognize his name, to respond to basic commands, and to understand the rhythms of human domestic life. He would wake at dawn with the family, help with simple farm chores, and even seem to understand the concept of property, carefully avoiding actions that would upset his human companions. His natural baboon dexterity made him particularly useful around the farm. He could open gates, carry tools, and even help with milking cows. But Jackie's most remarkable trait was his apparent desire to mimic human behavior. He would watch Ma shave in the morning and then attempt to duplicate the motions with his own hands. He learned to eat with utensils, to wear clothing without distress, and to walk upright for extended periods. Most remarkably, he seemed to understand the concept of work, taking pride in completing tasks and showing obvious pleasure when his efforts were praised. When war broke out in 1914, Albert Marr enlisted in the 3rd Transvaal Regiment, part of the South African forces that would fight alongside the British Empire. The decision to bring Jackie along was made partly from necessity. There was no one else to care for the baboon, and partly from the recognition that Jackie had become more than a pet. He was a companion, a working partner, and in many ways, a member of the family. The journey to the training camp at Potchefstroom was Jackie's first experience of military life, and he adapted to it with remarkable ease. The regular schedule, the emphasis on discipline and routine, and the clear hierarchy all seemed to appeal to his baboon nature. Within days, he had learned to recognize the various bugle calls that structured military life, to distinguish between officers and enlisted men, and to respond appropriately to military commands. The soldiers of the 3rd Transvaal Regiment were initially skeptical of their unusual new recruit, but Jackie's intelligence and obvious desire to please quickly won them over. He would stand at attention during inspections, his posture as rigid as any human soldier. He learned to salute, placing his right hand to his forehead with precision that would have made a drill sergeant proud. Most impressively, he seemed to understand the seriousness of military life, abandoning his natural baboon playfulness during formal activities. The regiment's deployment to German Southwest Africa in 1915 brought Jackie face to face with the realities of modern warfare. The campaign was fought in some of the world's most challenging terrain, the Kalahari Desert, where temperatures could reach killing levels during the day and drop to near freezing at night. Water was scarce, food was limited, and the constant threat of German forces made every day a test of survival. Jackie's natural abilities made him invaluable in this environment. His keen eyesight, superior to human vision in many ways, made him an excellent sentry. He could spot movement at distances that would challenge human observers, and his natural wariness of potential threats made him an early warning system for enemy activity. His ability to move silently through difficult terrain made him useful for reconnaissance missions, and his strength and agility allowed him to carry supplies and equipment that would burden human soldiers. But Jackie's most famous contribution to the war effort was his role in trench warfare. When the regiment was deployed to the Western Front in 1916, Jackie demonstrated an understanding of military tactics that amazed his human comrades. He seemed to grasp the concept of cover, automatically seeking protection when under fire. He learned to distinguish between friendly and enemy soldiers, reacting appropriately to different uniforms and equipment. Most remarkably, he appeared to understand the rhythm of trench warfare, knowing when to keep his head down and when it was safe to move. The Battle of Delville Wood in July 1916 marked the peak of Jackie's military career. The 3rd Transvaal Regiment was part of the South African forces that fought with distinction in this bloody engagement, and Jackie was with them in the trenches. When German forces launched a counterattack, Jackie's keen senses detected the approaching enemy before human sentries could see them. His warning gave the South Africans precious seconds to prepare their defenses, and his calm presence during the subsequent fighting helped maintain morale among soldiers who were facing overwhelming odds. During the battle, Jackie demonstrated courage that would have been remarkable in a human soldier. When a wounded South African fell in no man's land between the opposing trenches, Jackie crawled out to provide what comfort he could, using his body to shield the wounded man from enemy fire. German snipers, perhaps as amazed as the South Africans by the sight of a baboon in military uniform, seemed reluctant to fire at him. Jackie remained with the wounded soldier until stretcher bearers could reach them under cover of darkness. The incident earned Jackie his promotion to corporal, making him one of the few non-human soldiers to achieve non-commissioned officer rank through combat service. The ceremony was held in a communication trench behind the front lines, with the constant sound of artillery providing a grim backdrop. Jackie stood at attention, while his commanding officer pinned corporal's stripes to his uniform, and the assembled soldiers cheered, despite the constant danger of enemy snipers. Jackie's military career was not without its challenges. His natural baboon instincts occasionally conflicted with military discipline, leading to incidents that tested his human comrades' patience. He once disrupted a formal inspection by grooming a senior officer's mustache, apparently believing it needed attention. Another time, he caused chaos in the mess tent by attempting to establish baboon dominance over soldiers who were eating his favorite foods. These incidents were handled with good humor, but they highlighted the complexity of integrating a wild animal into military life. The war's end brought new challenges for Jackie. The armistice of November 11, 1918 was celebrated with cautious joy, but for soldiers who had lived through years of hell, the transition to peace was complex. Jackie seemed to understand that something fundamental had changed. He no longer tensed at the sound of distant thunder, no longer automatically sought cover when metal objects fell. The hypervigilance that had kept him alive in the trenches gradually faded as he prepared for a new chapter in his life. The return to South Africa transformed Jackie from a military working baboon into a national celebrity. He was awarded several medals for his service, including the Victory Medal and the British War Medal. The ceremonies were held with full military honors, and Jackie's story was featured in newspapers around the world. He became a symbol of the diverse forces that had fought for the British Empire, proof that courage and loyalty could emerge from the most unlikely sources. Jackie's post-war life was spent in comfortable retirement at Albert Marr's farm, where he lived surrounded by the Transvaal landscape that had shaped his early years. Visitors would come to see the famous war baboon, and Jackie would perform his military salute routine, with dignity befitting his rank. He maintained his military bearing until his death in 1921, and his remains were preserved and displayed in the South African National Museum of Military History. The legacy of Corporal Jackie extends beyond his individual service. He proved that intelligence and loyalty are not exclusively human traits, and that the bonds forged in combat can transcend species boundaries. His story demonstrates that, in the crucible of war, heroism can emerge from the most unexpected sources, and that sometimes the most remarkable soldiers are those who never fully understood what they were fighting for, but understood completely whom they were fighting alongside. Sergeant Gander, Newfoundland dog of Hong Kong. In the quiet coastal town of Gander, Newfoundland, where the Atlantic winds carry the scent of salt and pine through streets lined with modest homes, a large black Newfoundland dog named Pal was living the comfortable life of a beloved family pet. It was 1940, and the world was once again at war, though the conflict seemed distant from this peaceful corner of Canada. Pal spent his days playing with the neighborhood children, swimming in the cold waters of Gander Lake, and enjoying the simple pleasures that come with being a cherished member of a loving family. Pal was a magnificent specimen of his breed, nearly 6 feet long from nose to tail, weighing close to 100 pounds. With the gentle temperament and natural swimming ability that had made Newfoundland dogs legendary as water rescue animals, his thick black coat gleamed in the northern sunlight, and his intelligent brown eyes reflected a calm wisdom that seemed to understand the world around him better than most humans realized. He had no way of knowing that his peaceful existence was about to be transformed by the greatest conflict in human history. The transformation began when the Royal Rifles of Canada established a training base near Gander in preparation for overseas deployment. The soldiers, many of them young men from Quebec, who had never seen a Newfoundland dog before, were immediately charmed by Pal's size and gentle nature. He would appear at the edge of their training exercises, watching with apparent fascination as they went through their drills. Unlike other dogs who might bark or interfere, Pal seemed to understand that he was witnessing something important and serious. Private Fred Kelly, a young soldier from Montreal who had left behind his own beloved dog, was the first to befriend Pal. During off-duty hours, Kelly would sit with the big dog on the shores of Gander Lake, sharing stories about home and dreams about the future. Pal would listen with the patient attention that Newfoundlands are famous for, occasionally resting his massive head on Kelly's shoulder in a gesture of comfort that seemed almost human in its understanding. The decision to make Pal the regiment's mascot came naturally, as these things often do in military units. The soldiers needed something to remind them of home, something to boost morale during the long hours of training and preparation. Pal's calm presence and obvious intelligence made him perfect for the role. More importantly, he seemed to want the job appearing at morning parade, following the men during their exercises, and even learning to respond to basic military commands. When orders came for the Royal Rifles to deploy to Hong Kong in October 1941, the question of what to do with Pal became urgent. Military regulations were clear about animals accompanying troops overseas, but Pal had become more than a mascot to the men of the Royal Rifles, was their symbol of Canadian strength and determination. The decision to bring him along was made by the regiment's commanding officer, who understood that morale would be crucial in whatever lay ahead. The rechristening of Pal as Gander was done with full ceremony at the Gander airport before the regiment's departure. The big dog stood at attention, while his new military collar was placed around his neck, bearing his new name and the insignia of the Royal Rifles. The ceremony was simple but moving, with the men understanding that they were witnessing something significant. As their transport aircraft prepared for takeoff, Gander took his place among the soldiers, his calm presence a reassurance that home was traveling with them. The journey to Hong Kong was Gander's first experience of the wider world beyond Newfoundland's familiar landscapes. The multiple stops and transfers didn't seem to distress him. His natural Newfoundland temperament, bred for patience and endurance, served him well during the long flights and uncomfortable accommodations. The soldiers marveled at his adaptability, his ability to remain calm in unfamiliar situations, and his apparent understanding that they were all embarked on something important together. Hong Kong in late 1941 was a British Crown colony living on borrowed time. The Japanese forces that had been conquering vast swaths of China were positioned just across the border, and everyone knew that war was coming. The Royal Rifles were part of a small Commonwealth force, tasked with defending the supposedly impregnable island fortress. Though military planners in distant offices had little understanding of what they were asking these men to do, Gander's first taste of military life in Hong Kong revealed capabilities that amazed his human companions. His keen senses, developed through generations of breeding for water rescue work, made him an excellent sentry. He could detect approaching aircraft before human ears picked up their engines, giving air raid warnings that proved more reliable than mechanical systems. His natural protective instincts, combined with his impressive size, made him an effective guard for important installations and supply depots. But it was Gander's response to combat that truly distinguished him as a soldier. When the Japanese attack began on December 8, 1941, just hours after Pearl Harbor, Gander seemed to understand immediately that his human companions were in mortal danger. The bombardment that marked the beginning of the Battle of Hong Kong was unlike anything the Newfoundland dog had experienced. But instead of fleeing or cowering, he moved closer to the soldiers, as if his presence could somehow protect them from the horror that was unfolding. The siege of Hong Kong lasted 18 days, and Gander was with the Royal Rifles through every hour of that desperate defense. As Japanese forces landed on the island and began their methodical conquest, Gander proved that his courage matched his size. During the fighting at Lai Mun, he charged into battle alongside the soldiers, his massive frame providing both physical and psychological support to men who were facing overwhelming odds. Gander's most famous act of heroism came during the final days of the siege, when Japanese forces had nearly completed their conquest of Hong Kong. A group of wounded Canadian soldiers had taken shelter in a building that was about to be overrun. Japanese grenades began landing around their position, and the wounded men were unable to move quickly enough to escape. Without hesitation, Gander grabbed one of the grenades in his mouth and carried it away from the wounded soldiers before it exploded, saving their lives at the cost of his own. The explosion that killed Gander also marked the end of organized Canadian resistance in Hong Kong. The surviving members of the Royal Rifles were taken prisoner and would spend the remainder of the war in Japanese POW camps, where many of them would die from disease, starvation, and brutality. But they never forgot the big black dog who had died trying to protect them, and they carried his memory through the dark years that followed. The story of Gander's heroism might have died with the men who witnessed it, lost among the countless tragedies of the Pacific War. But the survivors of the Royal Rifles never forgot their four-legged comrade, and when they were finally liberated in 1945, they made sure that Gander's story was told. Their accounts of his courage and sacrifice gradually spread, transforming a Newfoundland family pet into a symbol of Canadian valor. In 2000, nearly 60 years after his death, Gander was posthumously awarded the Dickin Medal, often called the Victoria Cross for Animals, in recognition of his gallantry during the Battle of Hong Kong. The ceremony was held at the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, with surviving veterans of Hong Kong and their families in attendance. The medal citation read simply, "For saving the lives of Canadian infantrymen during the Battle of Lai Mun on Hong Kong Island in December 1941. But perhaps the most fitting memorial to Gander stands at the Gander Airport, where he received his military name. A bronze statue depicts the massive Newfoundland dog in a pose of alert readiness, his eyes scanning the horizon as if still watching for threats to his human companions. Visitors to the airport can read the inscription that tells his story, but the statue itself tells a deeper truth about the bonds that can form between humans and animals in the crucible of war. The legacy of Sergeant Gander extends far beyond his individual acts of heroism. His story demonstrates that courage is not the exclusive province of any single species, and that the protective instincts that drive animals to defend their families can be extended to include human companions who have earned their loyalty. In the darkness of Hong Kong's final hours, when all hope seemed lost, a big black dog from Newfoundland proved that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come from the most unexpected sources. Today, when military working dogs serve alongside soldiers in conflicts around the world, they carry forward the tradition that Gander helped establish. His story reminds us that the partnership between humans and animals in warfare is built on mutual trust, shared danger, and a loyalty that transcends the boundaries between species. In the end, Gander was more than a mascot or even a soldier. He was a comrade who understood that some things are worth dying for, even if you don't fully understand what they are. Corporal WOJTEK, Poland's ammunition bear. In the remote mountains of northern Iran, where ancient trade routes wind through landscapes that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, a tiny brown bear cub was struggling to survive in a world that had suddenly become very dangerous. It was 1942, and the Second World War had scattered people and animals across continents, creating unlikely encounters that would have been impossible in peacetime. The cub, perhaps 3 months old and weighing no more than a house cat, had been orphaned when his mother was killed by hunters. He was weak, frightened, and alone in a landscape that offered little mercy to the vulnerable. The discovery of the bear cub by a group of Polish soldiers was one of those chance encounters that can change the course of history. The men belonged to the 22nd Artillery Supply Company of the Polish II Corps, part of the extraordinary Polish army that had been forming in the Soviet Union after the German invasion of Poland in 1939. These soldiers had already endured more hardship than most people face in a lifetime imprisonment in Soviet gulags, forced marches across Asia, and the constant uncertainty of life as refugees in a world at war. Private Henryk Zacharewicz was walking through a village market near Hamadan when he heard about a local boy who had found an orphaned bear cub. The boy was trying to sell the animal for food money, and something about the tiny creature's plight moved Zacharewicz to compassion. Using his military rations as currency, he purchased the cub and brought him back to the Polish camp, where the exhausted soldiers found themselves with an unexpected new responsibility. The soldiers named the cub WOJTEK, a diminutive form of WOJTEK, meaning smiling warrior in Polish. The name proved prophetic, as the bear seemed to possess an almost human capacity for joy and mischief that helped lift the spirits of men who had endured terrible hardships. Fed on a diet of condensed milk mixed with honey, WOJTEK grew rapidly, his natural intelligence and playful nature making him an instant favorite among the Polish forces. The early months of WOJTEK's military life were spent learning the rhythms and routines that governed army existence. Unlike domestic animals, bears possess a remarkable capacity for learning complex behaviors, and WOJTEK seemed determined to become as much like a soldier as possible. He learned to respond to his name, to follow basic commands, and even to understand the difference between various bugle calls that structured military life. His favorite time was morning parade, where he would sit on his haunches and attempt to imitate the soldiers' saluting motion. As WOJTEK grew larger and Syrian brown bears can reach impressive sizes, integration into military life became more complex. His natural strength and dexterity made him useful for various tasks around the camp. He could carry supplies, move heavy objects, and even help with maintenance work. But it was his apparent understanding of military hierarchy that most impressed his human companions. He seemed to recognize rank insignia, showing appropriate deference to officers while maintaining a more casual relationship with enlisted men. The Polish II Corps' journey from Iran to Iraq and then to Palestine was WOJTEK's first experience of military movement on a large scale. The long convoys of trucks and equipment, the dust and heat of desert travel, and the constant vigilance required in potentially hostile territory all became part of his education as a soldier. He rode in the back of supply trucks, his massive head often visible above the canvas covers, watching the landscape pass with the calm attention of a seasoned traveler. Training in Palestine revealed new aspects of WOJTEK's remarkable intelligence. The bear learned to recognize different types of military equipment, to distinguish between friendly and potentially hostile aircraft, and even to understand the basics of ammunition handling. His handlers discovered that he could learn complex sequences of actions, remembering multi-step procedures with accuracy that would have impressed human recruits. Most remarkably, he seemed to understand the serious nature of military training, abandoning his natural playfulness during formal exercises. The bear's promotion to the rank of private came about through bureaucratic necessity rather than military achievement. When the Polish II Corps prepared to deploy to Italy in 1943, British military regulations prohibited the transport of pets or mascots on military vessels. However, these same regulations made no mention of enlisted personnel, regardless of species. The solution was elegantly simple. WOJTEK was formally enlisted in the Polish army, given his own paybook and service number, and assigned to the 22nd Artillery Supply Company as a private soldier. The enlisted bear's journey to Italy aboard British transport ships was his first experience of naval life, and he adapted to it with characteristic good humor. He quickly learned the ship's routines, understanding when it was safe to move about the deck and when he needed to stay below. His presence aboard ship became a morale booster for both Polish and British personnel, many of whom had never seen a bear, let alone one wearing military insignia and responding to commands in Polish. The Italian campaign would prove to be the defining period of Wojtek's military career. The fighting in Italy was some of the most brutal of the European war, with German forces occupying virtually impregnable mountain positions that could only be taken through costly frontal assaults. The Polish II Corps was assigned to some of the most difficult objectives, including the monastery at Monte Cassino, which had become a symbol of German defensive capability. Wojtek's most famous contribution to the war effort came during the Battle of Monte Cassino in May 1944. The XXXII Artillery Supply Company was responsible for keeping the Polish batteries supplied with ammunition during the intense bombardment that preceded the final assault on the monastery. The work was backbreaking 25-pound artillery shells had to be moved from supply dumps to gun positions under constant threat of German counter-battery fire. It was during this critical phase of the battle that Wojtek demonstrated capabilities that amazed even his closest handlers. Observing the human chain gangs passing ammunition from truck to gun position, the bear began to participate, carrying shells in his powerful arms and passing them along the line. His strength allowed him to carry multiple shells at once, and his careful handling showed that he understood the dangerous nature of what he was carrying. The sight of a brown bear in Polish uniform carrying artillery shells became legendary among the Allied forces fighting at Monte Cassino. Photographers captured images of Wojtek at work, and these pictures were soon appearing in newspapers around the world. The bear became a symbol of the Polish contribution to the Allied cause, proof that even the most unlikely recruits could serve the cause of freedom. The successful capture of Monte Cassino marked the peak of Wojtek's military career. His service during the battle earned him promotion to corporal, making him one of the highest-ranking non-human soldiers in military history. More importantly, his Imager brown bear carrying an artillery shell was adopted as the official emblem of the XXXII Artillery Supply Company, an honor that recognized his genuine contribution to their military effectiveness. The war's end brought new challenges for Wojtek. Victory in Europe meant that the Polish II Corps would be disbanded, its soldiers scattered to new lives in a world that had been forever changed by 6 years of war. For many Polish soldiers, there could be no return to a homeland that was now under Soviet control. They faced the prospect of permanent exile, building new lives in foreign countries that might offer refuge but could never truly replace what they had lost. Wojtek's post-war life was spent at Edinburgh Zoo in Scotland, where many former members of the Polish II Corps had settled. The transition from active military service to civilian captivity was difficult for a bear who had spent his adult life as a soldier. His former comrades visited him regularly, and he would respond to Polish commands and show obvious pleasure at hearing his native language. These visits became pilgrimages of sorts, opportunities for exiled Polish veterans to reconnect with a living symbol of their wartime service. The bear's life at Edinburgh Zoo lasted until 1963, and throughout those years he remained a celebrity. Visitors would come specifically to see the famous soldier bear, and Wojtek would often perform some of his old military tricks standing at attention, saluting in his fashion, or wrestling playfully with his keepers. But those who knew him best could see that something had gone out of him with the end of the war. He had been bred for freedom and purpose, and captivity, however comfortable, could never fully satisfy those needs. The legacy of Corporal Wojtek extends far beyond his individual service record. His story became part of the larger narrative of Polish resistance and sacrifice during World War II, a reminder that the fight against fascism drew support from the most unexpected sources. In Poland, his memory was suppressed during the communist era, as his association with the Western Allies made him politically inconvenient. But after the fall of communism, Wojtek was rediscovered as a symbol of Polish courage and determination. Today, statues of Wojtek stand in several cities, including Edinburgh, Krakow, and London. Each depicts the bear in his characteristic pose standing upright, carrying an artillery shell, ready to serve alongside his human comrades. These monuments remind viewers that heroism comes in many forms, and that the bonds forged in combat can transcend the boundaries between species. The story of WOJTEK also highlights the human capacity for compassion, even in the midst of war's brutality. The Polish soldiers who rescued a dying bear cub in the mountains of Iran were men who had lost everything: their homes, their families, their country. Yet they found room in their hearts and their unit for a creature that needed care, and that care was repaid with a loyalty that lasted for life. In military circles, WOJTEK's service record remains unique. No other bear has achieved such high rank or contributed so directly to military operations. His story challenges conventional thinking about intelligence, loyalty, and the nature of military service itself. He proved that, with proper training and care, even the most unlikely recruits can make genuine contributions to military effectiveness. The gentle giant who learned to carry ammunition at Monte Cassino represents something profound about the relationship between humans and animals in times of crisis. In caring for WOJTEK, the Polish soldiers were not just training a mascot, they were creating a family member, a comrade who would share their dangers and their triumphs. His story reminds us that in the darkest hours of human conflict, the capacity for love and loyalty can emerge from the most unexpected places, creating bonds that time and distance cannot break. Sergeant Reckless, the Korean War, pack horse. In the rolling hills near Seoul, where ancient Buddhist temples perched on mountainsides that had witnessed centuries of Korean history, a small chestnut mare was living the hard life of a racehorse in a country torn apart by war. It was October 1952, and the Korean peninsula had been a battlefield for more than 2 years, its cities reduced to rubble, and its people scattered by a conflict that seemed to have no end. The mare, known to her Korean handlers as Chimhai, meaning flame of the morning, was barely 14 hands high, but possessed the heart and endurance that had made Korean horses legendary among cavalry forces throughout Asia. Chimhai's life changed forever when she met Lieutenant Eric Pedersen of the United States Marine Corps. Pedersen, a young officer serving with the 5th Marine Regiment's recoilless rifle platoon, was looking for a pack animal capable of carrying ammunition to forward positions that were inaccessible to vehicles. The mountainous terrain of Korea, with its steep ridges and narrow trails, made resupply operations extremely dangerous for human soldiers. What Pedersen needed was an animal with the intelligence to learn complex routes, the courage to work under fire, and the loyalty to keep working when every instinct said to flee. The poker game that brought them together was typical of military life in a combat zone: soldiers finding brief moments of normalcy amid the chaos of war. Pedersen had won 250 in a marathon poker session with fellow Marines, and when he heard about a racehorse for sale in Seoul, he saw an opportunity to solve his unit's resupply problems. The money changed hands in a transaction that would have seemed routine to anyone watching, but it was actually the beginning of one of the most remarkable partnerships in military history. The rechristening of Chimhai as Reckless reflected both her new role and her spirit. The name came from the 75mm recoilless rifles that her platoon operated, weapons that could provide crucial fire support to infantry units, but required constant resupply of heavy ammunition. Reckless would become the living embodiment of that weapon system's motto: reckless and ready. From her first day with the Marines, it was clear that she understood she had joined something larger than herself. Training Reckless for military service revealed an intelligence that impressed even experienced animal handlers. Korean horses had been working alongside humans for thousands of years, and this legacy of cooperation was apparent in everything Reckless did. She learned to recognize different types of ammunition by sight and weight, understanding that 75mm shells required different handling than small arms ammunition. More remarkably, she seemed to grasp the urgency of military operations, moving faster when the situation was critical and pacing herself during routine supply runs. The mare's first combat experiences came during the static phase of the Korean War, when opposing forces had settled into elaborate trench systems reminiscent of World War I. The Marines held positions along hills with names like Bunker Hill and Vegas, facing Chinese and North Korean forces across no man's lands that were swept by machine gun fire and mortar barrages. It was in this deadly environment that Reckless proved her worth as a soldier. Her typical mission involved carrying 8 75mm shells, weighing nearly 200 pounds, from supply points to forward gun positions. The journey often required her to traverse exposed terrain under enemy observation, with the constant threat of sniper fire and artillery bombardment. What made Reckless extraordinary was not just her willingness to make these dangerous trips, but her ability to do so independently, without human guidance, following memorized routes with precision that would have impressed a human soldier. The Battle of Vegas, in March 1953, marked the pinnacle of Reckless's military career. The Chinese forces had launched a massive assault on the Marine positions, and the 5th Regiment found itself fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. The recoilless rifle platoon was crucial to the defense, but keeping the guns supplied with ammunition required constant resupply missions across terrain that was being swept by enemy fire. It was during this battle that Reckless performed the feat that would make her legend. Over the course of a single day, she made 51 trips from the ammunition supply point to the gun positions on Vegas, carrying over 90 pounds of ammunition and supplies. The distance of each trip was nearly a mile, much of it over steep terrain that would have challenged a mountain climber. More remarkably, she made most of these trips alone, following her memorized routes while explosions erupted around her and bullets whistled overhead. The Marines who witnessed Reckless during the Battle of Vegas described a transformation that seemed almost supernatural. The small chestnut mare, who could be playful and affectionate during quiet moments, became a machine of military efficiency under fire. She seemed to understand not just where she needed to go, but why she needed to get there quickly. Her pace would accelerate when she heard the distinctive sound of recoilless rifle fire, as if she knew that her human companions were running low on ammunition. During one particularly intense phase of the battle, Reckless was wounded by shrapnel from an enemy mortar round. The injury was painful but not serious, yet it revealed another aspect of her remarkable character. Rather than seeking shelter or comfort, she continued her ammunition runs, limping slightly, but maintaining her pace. A Marine corpsman attempted to treat her wound during one of her brief stops at the supply point, but Reckless seemed more concerned with getting back to work than with her own comfort. The successful defense of Vegas earned Reckless a battlefield promotion to sergeant, making her one of the few non-human soldiers to achieve non-commissioned officer rank through combat service. The promotion ceremony was held in a bunker behind the front lines, with the sound of artillery providing a grim backdrop. Reckless stood at attention, while her commanding officer pinned sergeant's stripes to her halter, and the assembled Marines cheered despite the constant danger of enemy counterattack. But Reckless's service went beyond simple ammunition carrying. She seemed to understand the broader context of military operations, anticipating needs and responding to situations that hadn't been part of her training. During medical evacuations, she would position herself to help carry wounded Marines to safety. When supply convoys were delayed, she would make extra trips to ensure that forward positions remained supplied. Most remarkably, she appeared to understand the concept of tactical priority, focusing her efforts on the most critical supply needs. The war's end brought bittersweet emotions for Reckless and her human companions. The armistice of July 27, 1953, ended the active fighting, but the Marines who had served with Reckless knew that their partnership with the remarkable mare had been something special. She had become more than a working animal. She was a comrade who had shared their dangers and their triumphs, who had proven that courage and dedication know no species boundaries. The journey to the United States was Reckless's first experience of life beyond the Korean peninsula. The Marines were determined that she should receive the recognition she deserved, and arrangements were made for her to travel to Camp Pendleton in California. The trans-Pacific voyage was a challenge for a horse who had never been on a ship, but Reckless adapted with the same stoicism she had shown during combat operations. The ceremonies honoring Reckless's service were among the most elaborate ever held for a non-human soldier. She was awarded 2 Purple Hearts for wounds received in action, the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal, the Presidential Unit Citation, and several other decorations. More importantly, she was granted full retirement benefits, including medical care and comfortable quarters at Camp Pendleton. The Marines understood that they owed her a debt that could never be fully repaid. Reckless's life at Camp Pendleton became a new kind of service, as she served as a living symbol of Marine Corps values and traditions. Visitors would come specifically to see the famous warhorse, and Reckless would perform some of her old military behaviors, standing at attention, responding to commands, or demonstrating her ammunition-carrying techniques. But those who knew her best could see that she remained alert, as if still listening for the sound of recoilless rifle fire that would summon her to duty. The mare's death in 1968 marked the end of an era. She was buried at Camp Pendleton with full military honors, her grave marked by a monument that lists her decorations and describes her service. The inscription reads simply, "She wasn't a horse, she was a Marine." For the men who had served with her in Korea, no epitaph could have been more appropriate. The legacy of Sergeant Reckless extends far beyond her individual service record. She established a new standard for military animals, proving that with proper training and respect, animals could become genuine partners in military operations rather than mere tools. Her story demonstrates that intelligence and courage are not exclusively human traits, and that the bonds forged in combat can transcend the boundaries between species. Today, when military units deploy with working animals, they carry forward traditions that Reckless helped establish. Her story reminds us that the partnership between humans and animals in warfare is built on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. In the frozen hills of Korea, a small chestnut mare proved that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most reliable soldiers are those who serve not for glory or recognition, but simply because they understand that their human companions need them. The monument at Camp Pendleton stands as a reminder that military service takes many forms, and that dedication to duty can emerge from the most unexpected sources. Reckless never understood the political complexities of the Korean War, never grasped the strategic importance of the battles she helped fight, but she understood completely the needs of the Marines who had become her family, and she served those needs with a loyalty that time and distance could not diminish. Sergeant Major JIGGS, first Bulldog of the U.S. Marines. In the grand tradition of military mascots that seem to embody the very spirit of their units, there emerged in 1922 a bulldog whose jowled face and determined waddle would become synonymous with the United States Marine Corps itself. This was not just any bulldog, but a creature whose lineage and bearing suggested he was born for military service, whose very appearance seemed to mirror the tenacious, never-surrender attitude that Marines prized above all other virtues. His name was JIGGS, and he would become the first in a dynasty of Marine Corps bulldogs that continues to this day. The story of JIGGS begins with Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most colorful and controversial figures in Marine Corps history. Butler, who had earned 2 Medals of Honor and commanded Marines in conflicts from the Philippines to Haiti, understood better than most the importance of symbols and traditions in building unit cohesion. When he was placed in command of Marine Barracks Quantico in 1921, he recognized an opportunity to establish a tradition that would capture the imagination of Marines for generations to come. The selection of a bulldog as the Marine Corps mascot was far from arbitrary. The breed's characteristics, determination, courage, tenacity, and an impressive ability to hold ground against superior forces seemed to mirror the qualities that Marines valued in themselves. More practically, bulldogs possessed the temperament necessary for military life. They were generally calm around large groups of people, they could tolerate noise and confusion, and they had the intelligence to learn complex routines and behaviors. JIGGS arrived at Quantico as a puppy, but his bloodline suggested greatness. He was descended from champions, dogs whose conformation and temperament represented the best of the breed. From his earliest days at the Marine base, it was clear that JIGGS possessed something special, an almost human understanding of military protocol, and an apparent desire to be part of the pageantry and ceremony that defined Marine Corps life. The early training of JIGGS revealed capabilities that amazed even experienced drill instructors. He learned to respond to bugle calls, understanding the difference between reveille, mess call, and taps. He mastered the art of standing at attention during formal ceremonies, his compact body rigid and his eyes fixed straight ahead with an intensity that would have made a drill instructor proud. Most remarkably, he seemed to understand the concept of rank, showing appropriate deference to officers while maintaining a more relaxed demeanor around enlisted Marines. The Bulldog's rapid promotion through the enlisted ranks was based on genuine achievement rather than mere sentimentality. JIGGS demonstrated an understanding of military routine that went beyond simple conditioning. He would appear at the proper locations for various ceremonies without being called, suggesting that he had internalized the complex schedule that governed base life. His behavior during inspections was exemplary. He would stand motionless for extended periods, allowing visiting dignitaries to examine him as they would any other Marine. The pinnacle of JIGGS's career came with his promotion to Sergeant Major, the highest enlisted rank in the Marine Corps. The ceremony was conducted with full military honors, complete with a dress parade and formal reading of orders. JIGGS stood at attention throughout the proceedings, his muscular body trembling slightly with what observers interpreted as pride. The gold chevrons of his rank were sewn onto a custom-made collar, and his new status was entered into the official records of Marine Barracks Quantico. Life, as a sergeant major, brought new responsibilities for JIGGS. He was expected to maintain the highest standards of military bearing, to serve as an example for junior Marines, and to represent the Corps at official functions. His daily routine became a model of military precision. He would appear at morning formation, observe training exercises with apparent interest, and take his position at evening parade with the punctuality of a Swiss timepiece. His presence at these events was more than ceremonial, it was inspirational, reminding Marines that dedication to duty was the highest virtue. The Bulldog's service was not without its dramatic moments. During one memorable incident, a fire broke out in the base motor pool, threatening to spread to nearby ammunition storage areas. While Marines fought the blaze, JIGGS positioned himself at the entrance to the ammunition bunkers, apparently understanding that this was a critical point that needed to be guarded. He remained at his post throughout the emergency, his calm presence helping to maintain order during a chaotic situation. JIGGS's relationship with the Marines under his nominal command was complex and touching. Young recruits, many of them away from home for the first time, found comfort in the presence of a creature who seemed to understand their struggles. The Bulldog had an uncanny ability to sense when Marines were homesick or troubled, appearing at their sides during difficult moments with a solidity and warmth that words could not provide. Veterans of his era would later describe him as the finest sergeant major they had ever served under, meaning every word of that apparently humorous statement. The discipline that JIGGS maintained was legendary throughout the Marine Corps. He never missed a formation, never appeared with less than perfect grooming, and never failed to maintain the bearing appropriate to his rank. His diet was carefully regulated, his exercise routine was as structured as that of any Marine, and his medical care was provided by the base veterinarian with the same attention given to human personnel. In every way that mattered, JIGGS was treated as what he had officially become, a Marine. The social aspects of base life revealed another dimension of JIGGS's personality. During off-duty hours, he would often be found in the enlisted men's club, observing the informal interactions that built unit cohesion. He seemed to understand the difference between on-duty and off-duty behavior, relaxing his military bearing during these casual moments, while never completely abandoning the dignity that his rank required. These visits were not mere tolerance of Marine social life. They were active participation in the community that military service creates. The tradition of Marine Corps birthday celebrations took on special meaning during JIGGS's tenure. The annual birthday ball, commemorating the founding of the Corps in 1775, was the most important social event of the Marine calendar, and JIGGS played a central role in these festivities. He would appear in dress uniforma, miniature version of Marine dress blues, complete with decorations and insignia, and participate in the ceremony with a solemnity that suggested he understood the historical significance of the occasion. Training exercises provided opportunities for JIGGS to demonstrate skills that went beyond ceremonial functions. He learned to recognize the sound of different types of aircraft, distinguishing between friendly and potentially hostile engines. His keen senses made him an effective early warning system, and more than once, his alert behavior prompted security measures that proved justified. These contributions to base security were noted in official reports, adding substance to what might otherwise have been dismissed as merely symbolic service. The concept of military discipline took on new meaning when applied to a bulldog. JIGGS's behavior was held to the same standards expected of human Marines, and he met those standards with consistency that impressed even skeptical observers. He never appeared at formations in less than perfect condition, never failed to respond appropriately to commands, and never exhibited behavior that would have been considered unmilitary in a human Marine. His example influenced the behavior of human personnel, who found it difficult to maintain lower standards than those demonstrated by their four-legged sergeant major. The intellectual capabilities that JIGGS displayed went far beyond simple conditioning or trick training. He seemed to understand the concept of military rank in ways that suggested genuine comprehension rather than mere response to visual cues. When visiting officers toured the base, JIGGS would position himself appropriately according to their rank, showing the deference due to generals while maintaining the friendly but respectful demeanor appropriate when greeting fellow senior enlisted personnel. This behavior was not taught, it was observed and developed naturally, suggesting an intelligence that military observers found remarkable. The daily routine that governed JIGGS's life reflected the precision and attention to detail that characterized Marine Corps culture. His morning began with personal grooming conducted by Marines assigned to his care, ensuring that his coat was brushed to perfection and his collar properly aligned. He would then report to morning formation, taking his position among the senior staff with the punctuality that Marines expected from their leaders. Throughout the day, his schedule included inspections, administrative duties, and social functions, each conducted with the same attention to military bearing. The end of JIGGS's remarkable career came in 1927, when age and health concerns made it clear that the time had come for retirement. The decision was made with the same care and attention given to any senior Marine approaching the end of service, with consideration for his comfort and dignity taking precedence over all other factors. His final parade was conducted with full military honors, a ceremony that drew Marines from throughout the region who wanted to pay their respects to a legend. The funeral of Sergeant Major JIGGS was an event that demonstrated the depth of affection and respect he had earned during his service. The ceremony included a 21-gun salute, the playing of taps, and the presentation of a folded flag to his handlers. His grave at Quantico was marked with a monument befitting his rank and service, and the inscription made clear that he was being honored not as a pet or mascot, but as a Marine who had served with distinction. The legacy of Sergeant Major JIGGS extends far beyond his individual service record. He established the template for military working animals that would influence policies and practices for decades to come. His example proved that animals could be more than symbols or morale boosters. They could be genuine contributors to military effectiveness, partners worthy of respect and recognition. The tradition he began continues today, with successive generations of Marine Corps bulldogs carrying forward the standards he established. The influence of JIGGS on Marine Corps culture cannot be overstated. His story became part of the institutional memory of the Corps, a reminder that dedication to duty and excellence in service could come from unexpected sources. Young Marines learned about his example during their training, understanding that the standards he maintained were not impossible goals, but achievable objectives for those willing to commit themselves fully to military service. The monument that marks JIGGS's grave at Quantico has become a place of pilgrimage for Marines and military history enthusiasts. Visitors come to pay their respects to a bulldog who proved that heroism and dedication know no species boundaries. The inscription on his monument captures the essence of his service. Here lies a Marine who served his country with honor. For those who knew him, no higher praise could have been given. Today, when Marine Corps units deploy around the world, they carry forward traditions that Sergeant Major JIGGS helped establish. His story reminds us that military service is fundamentally about character courage, loyalty, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. These qualities, he proved, are not exclusively human traits, and the bonds forged in military service can transcend the boundaries between species. The sight of a bulldog in marine dress blues, standing at attention during a ceremony at Quantico, connects modern Marines to their institutional heritage in ways that no textbook could achieve. JIGGS's successors continue to embody the spirit he established, serving as living reminders that the best traditions are those that honor service, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds between those who serve together. In the end, Sergeant Major JIGGS was more than the first bulldog of the Marine Corps, was the embodiment of everything Marines strive to be, wrapped in a compact, determined package that could inspire excellence simply by being present. Sergeant CHESTY 15, Drillmaster, on a leash. In the humid summer heat of Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, where the Spanish moss hangs heavy from ancient oaks and the sound of drill instructors' voices carries across parade grounds that have shaped Marines for generations, a compact English bulldog named CHESTY 14th began what would become one of the most intensive military careers ever undertaken by a four-legged recruit. It was 2013, and the tradition established by Sergeant Major JIGGS nearly a century earlier was about to be carried forward by a dog whose stern expression and unwavering gaze would become legendary among Marines and recruits alike. CHESTY 14 was born into military service in a way that few animals ever experience. Selected from a lineage of bulldogs that had been bred specifically for military temperament and bearing, he arrived at Paris Island as a puppy with bloodlines that traced back through generations of Marine Corps mascots. His breeding was not accidental. Every aspect of his genetics had been carefully considered to produce an animal capable of representing the finest traditions of the Marine Corps while maintaining the physical and emotional resilience necessary for a demanding military career. The early training of CHESTY 14th revealed capabilities that impressed even veteran drill instructors who had spent decades perfecting the art of military discipline. Unlike his predecessors, who had learned military bearing through gradual exposure and conditioning, CHESTY 14th seemed to possess an innate understanding of military protocol. He would stand at attention for extended periods without fidgeting, his compact body rigid with a discipline that many human recruits struggled to maintain. His eyes, dark and intelligent, seemed to assess every situation with the calculating gaze of a seasoned Marine, evaluating a tactical problem. The bulldog's integration into the daily rhythm of recruit training was seamless in ways that surprised even experienced handlers. He learned to recognize the different phases of the training cycle, understanding when recruits were beginning their transformation from civilians to Marines and adjusting his behavior accordingly. During the early weeks, when recruits were struggling to master basic military skills, Chesty 14 would maintain a patient but stern presence, his very stillness serving as an example of the self-control that military service demanded. The most remarkable aspect of Chesty 14's service was his apparent ability to assess individual recruits and respond appropriately to their needs. Drill instructors began to notice that the Bulldog would position himself near recruits who were struggling with confidence or homesickness, his solid presence providing comfort without compromising the rigorous standards that Parris Island maintained. Conversely, he seemed to recognize recruits who were becoming overconfident or disrespectful, fixing them with a stare that could be more intimidating than any human correction. The daily routine that governed Chesty 14's life reflected the precision and attention to detail that characterized Marine Corps culture. His morning began before dawn, with personal grooming conducted by Marines assigned to his care, ensuring that his coat was brushed to perfection and his collar properly aligned with military precision. He would then report to morning formation, taking his position among the drill instructors with the punctuality that Marines expected from their leaders. Throughout the day, his schedule included inspections, training observations, and ceremonial duties, each conducted with the same attention to military bearing that he demanded from the recruits around him. The psychological impact of Chesty 14's presence during training exercises was profound and carefully studied by Marine Corps leadership. Recruits reported that his calm demeanor during stressful situations helped them maintain composure during challenging phases of training. His apparent fearlessness during live-fire exercises and his steady presence during night training gave recruits confidence in their own ability to handle military stress. More importantly, his unwavering standards of military bearing served as a constant reminder that excellence was not negotiable, regardless of circumstances. The Bulldog's participation in graduation ceremonies became one of the most memorable aspects of recruit training for thousands of young Marines. Standing at attention during the formal parade that marked the completion of basic training, Chesty 14 embodied the transformation that recruits had undergone during their time at Parris Island. His presence on the parade ground, resplendent in his dress collar and displaying the bearing of a seasoned Marine, served as a living symbol of the standards they had achieved and would be expected to maintain throughout their military careers. The technological aspects of modern military training provided new challenges for Chesty 14 that his predecessors had never faced. The integration of advanced communication systems, sophisticated training equipment, and complex logistics required him to adapt to an environment that was far more technologically demanding than anything previous Marine Corps mascots had encountered. His ability to remain calm and focused amid the electronic noise and mechanical complexity of modern military training demonstrated an adaptability that impressed both trainers and observers. The social media age brought unprecedented attention to Chesty 14's service, with images and videos of the stern-faced Bulldog reaching millions of people around the world. His reputation extended far beyond the Marine Corps, making him one of the most recognizable military animals in American history. Despite this celebrity, he maintained the same rigorous standards of military bearing, never allowing public attention to compromise his primary mission of training Marines. The disciplinary standards that Chesty 14 maintained throughout his service were legendary among those who worked with him. He never missed a formation, never appeared with less than perfect grooming, and never failed to maintain the bearing appropriate to his rank. His diet was carefully regulated according to military nutrition standards. His exercise routine was as structured as that of any Marine, and his medical care was provided with the same attention given to human personnel. In every measurable way, Chesty 14 lived up to the standards expected of a Marine sergeant. The international recognition that came with Chesty 14's service included visits from foreign military dignitaries, participation in joint training exercises, and representation of the Marine Corps at international military ceremonies. His ability to maintain military bearing during these high-pressure events demonstrated a level of professional competence that would have been impressive in a human Marine. Foreign military observers frequently commented on the discipline and bearing that American military animals displayed, with CHESTY 14 serving as the primary example of these standards. The training innovations that emerged during CHESTY 14's tenure reflected the Marine Corps' commitment to continuous improvement in military education. His presence during experimental training programs provided valuable data about the psychological and motivational effects of animal-assisted military training. Research conducted during his service contributed to new understanding about stress management, leadership development, and the role of tradition in military effectiveness. The retirement ceremony for CHESTY 14 in 2018 marked the end of an era in Marine Corps history. The formal parade conducted in his honor drew Marines from throughout the Corps who wanted to pay their respects to a bulldog who had helped train thousands of their fellow Marines. The transfer of responsibilities to his successor, CHESTY 15th, was conducted with the same military precision that had characterized every aspect of his service, ensuring continuity in traditions that stretched back nearly a century. The legacy of Sergeant CHESTY XIV extends far beyond his individual service record. He refined and modernized the role of military mascots in ways that influenced policies and practices throughout the American military. His example proved that animals could adapt to the technological complexities of modern warfare while maintaining the timeless traditions that gave military service its meaning. The thousands of Marines who trained under his watchful eye carried forward the standards he embodied, spreading his influence throughout the Corps and beyond. The museum display that now houses artifacts from CHESTY 14th service provides visitors with insight into the daily life of a military working animal in the modern era. His collars, ceremonial equipment, and training records tell the story of a bulldog who served his country with the same dedication and professionalism expected of human Marines. The interactive exhibits allow visitors to understand the complexity and demands of military animal service in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. Today, when Marine recruits stand at attention on the parade grounds of Paris Island, they continue traditions that CHESTY 14th helped maintain and refine. His story reminds us that military excellence is not achieved through individual effort alone, but through the collective commitment of all who serve, regardless of species. The stern gaze that could motivate struggling recruits and the steady presence that provided comfort during difficult training continue to influence Marine Corps culture through the traditions he strengthened and the standards he upheld. Lance Corporal William Billy Windsor, Royal Welsh Goat with Attitude. In the remote mountains of Kashmir, where ancient trade routes wind through landscapes that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, a young Kashmiri goat was living the traditional life of his breed, grazing on alpine meadows and navigating the treacherous terrain that had shaped his ancestors for countless generations. He possessed the robust constitution and independent spirit that had made Kashmiri goats legendary among mountain peoples, with the cream-colored coat and curved horns that marked him as a prime specimen of his breed. He had no way of knowing that his peaceful existence was about to be transformed by a royal gift that would make him one of the most famous goats in British military history. The tradition that brought Billy Windsor into military service stretched back more than 2 centuries, rooted in the complex relationships between the British Crown and the regiments that served as the backbone of imperial defence. The Royal Welsh Regiment had maintained the custom of goat mascots since the American Revolutionary War, when a wild goat had supposedly saved a Welsh regiment from ambush by warning of approaching enemy forces. This legend, whether true or embellished, had become part of the regiment's identity, and successive goats had served as living symbols of Welsh military tradition. The selection of Billy Windsor was made at the highest levels of British society, with Queen Elizabeth II personally choosing him as a gift to the Royal Welsh Regiment in 2001. The ceremony that marked his formal presentation was conducted with all the pageantry that the British military reserves for its most significant traditions. Billy stood with remarkable composure as he was officially inducted into the regiment, his new military collar bearing the insignia and battle honours that connected him to centuries of Welsh military service. The early training of Billy Windsor revealed an intelligence and adaptability that impressed even veteran animal handlers. Unlike domestic goats, which often display stubborn independence, Billy seemed to understand that he had joined something larger than himself. He learned to respond to military commands, to maintain appropriate behavior during formal ceremonies, and to represent his regiment with the dignity that royal patronage demanded. His natural goat curiosity was channeled into an apparent interest in military affairs that went far beyond mere conditioning. The appointment of a dedicated goat major to oversee Billy's care reflected the serious attention that the British military paid to its mascot traditions. This officer, usually a sergeant major with extensive experience in ceremonial duties, was responsible for every aspect of Billy's military life, from his daily grooming to his participation in state ceremonies. The relationship between Billy and his goat major became one of the most closely watched partnerships in the British Army, with both participants held to standards that would have been impressive in any military context. The daily routine that governed Billy Windsor's life reflected the precision and attention to detail that characterized British military tradition. His morning began with grooming, conducted according to regulations that specified everything from coat care to hoof maintenance. He would then participate in morning inspection, standing at attention while officers examined his condition and bearing. Throughout the day, his schedule included training exercises, ceremonial rehearsals, and public duties, each conducted with the military precision that the Royal Welsh Regiment demanded from all its members. The most challenging aspect of Billy Windsor's service came during his deployment to Cyprus in 2006, where the Royal Welsh Regiment was serving as part of the British Forces Cyprus garrison. The Mediterranean climate and unfamiliar terrain presented new challenges for a goat accustomed to the cooler temperatures and familiar landscapes of Wales. His adaptation to military life in a foreign posting demonstrated the flexibility and resilience that made him an effective military mascot. The incident that nearly ended Billy Windsor's military career occurred during a formal parade in Cyprus, when his natural goat instincts conflicted dramatically with military protocol. During a ceremonial review, Billy broke ranks and charged at a drummer, delivering a headbutt that knocked the unfortunate musician off his feet and disrupted the entire proceedings. The incident was witnessed by senior military officials and created a diplomatic crisis that required intervention at the highest levels of command. The court-martial proceedings that followed Billy's assault on the drummer were conducted with the full formality that British military justice requires. Billy stood before a panel of officers while charges were read, his demeanor suggesting either stoic acceptance of military justice or complete indifference to human legal proceedings. The charges of unacceptable behavior and lack of decorum were serious enough to warrant his reduction in rank from lance corporal to fusilier, making him one of the few military animals to face formal disciplinary action for conduct issues. The period of Billy's service as a demoted fusilier provided insights into the psychology of military animals and the importance of rank recognition in military culture. His handlers noted changes in his behavior that suggested he somehow understood that his status had been altered. He became more subdued during formal ceremonies, less assertive in his interactions with other military personnel, and apparently more careful about maintaining proper military bearing. Whether this was genuine comprehension or coincidental behavior modification, it impressed observers who had expected no such response. The rehabilitation of Billy Windsor's military career required patience and careful management from his handlers. The process of rebuilding trust and demonstrating improved behavior took months of careful attention to every aspect of his military service. His goat major implemented additional training protocols designed to reinforce appropriate ceremonial behavior while maintaining the natural goat characteristics that made him an effective mascot. The success of this rehabilitation would eventually lead to his restoration to his former rank. The ceremonial duties that Billy Windsor performed throughout his career included some of the most prestigious events in the British military calendar. He participated in Trooping the Colour, state visits by foreign dignitaries, and regimental celebrations that drew thousands of spectators. His ability to maintain military bearing during these high-pressure events demonstrated a level of professional competence that would have been impressive in any military context. Foreign military observers frequently commented on the discipline and training that British military animals displayed. The international recognition that came with Billy Windsor's service extended far beyond military circles. His story became part of popular culture, with media outlets around the world reporting on the goat who had been court-martialed for assault. This attention brought unprecedented visibility to the tradition of military mascots, while highlighting the serious attention that professional militaries pay to ceremonial traditions. Despite this celebrity, Billy maintained the same rigorous standards of military bearing that had characterized his service from the beginning. The medical care that Billy Windsor received throughout his military career reflected the British Army's commitment to the welfare of all its personnel, regardless of species. Regular veterinary examinations, specialized dietary management, and preventive care protocols ensured that he remained in peak physical condition throughout his service. The medical records maintained during his career provided valuable data about the health requirements of military working animals in modern service conditions. The retirement ceremony for Billy Windsor in 2009 marked the end of one of the most eventful military careers in British Army history. The formal parade conducted in his honour drew veterans from throughout the Royal Welsh Regiment who wanted to pay their respects to a goat who had served with distinction despite his occasional lapses in military bearing. The transfer of his responsibilities to his successor was conducted with the military precision that had characterized every aspect of his service. The transition to civilian life at Whipsnade Zoo represented a significant change for an animal who had spent his adult life in military service. The zoo environment, while comfortable and well managed, lacked the structure and purpose that had defined Billy's military career. Visitors to the zoo could observe him in retirement, but those familiar with his military service noted the difference between his current demeanor and the alert, purposeful bearing he had maintained during his active duty years. The legacy of Lance Corporal Billy Windsor extends far beyond his individual service record. His career highlighted both the benefits and challenges of integrating animals into modern military service, providing valuable lessons about training, discipline, and the management of military mascots. His story demonstrated that military animals, like their human counterparts, could face disciplinary challenges while maintaining overall excellence in service. The educational programs that now use Billy Windsor's story to teach about military tradition and animal behavior reach audiences around the world. His experience provides a unique case study in military justice, animal psychology, and the role of tradition in modern armed forces. Students of military history find in his career a microcosm of the challenges and rewards that come with maintaining centuries-old traditions in contemporary military organizations. Today, when members of the Royal Welsh Regiment stand at attention during ceremonial parades, they continue traditions that Billy Windsor helped maintain and refine during his years of service. His story reminds us that military service requires not just courage and dedication, but also the ability to learn from mistakes and adapt to changing circumstances. The goat who was court-martialed for assault and lived to serve with honor again embodies the military principle that redemption is possible for those willing to meet the standards that service demands. Corporal Shenkin IV, successor in White Kashmere. In the rolling hills of Wales, where ancient castles overlook valleys that have echoed with the sound of military drums for more than a millennium, a young Kashmiri goat was preparing to inherit one of the most prestigious positions in the British Army. It was 2018, and the tradition that had been carried forward by Billy Windsor was about to pass to a successor whose lineage and training would continue the Royal Welsh Regiment's centuries-old connection to these remarkable animals. The new goat, destined to become Shenkin IV, possessed the cream-colored coat and intelligent eyes that marked him as worthy of royal service. The selection process for Shenkin IV involved considerations that went far beyond simple breeding and appearance. Military officials, veterinary experts, and animal behaviorists collaborated to identify a goat whose temperament and physical characteristics would make him suitable for the demanding requirements of military service. The candidate had to demonstrate the calm demeanor necessary for ceremonial duties, the intelligence required for military training, and the robust health essential for a career that would span years of public appearances and formal ceremonies. The induction ceremony for Shenkin IV was conducted at Cardiff Castle, the historic fortress that had served as a symbol of Welsh military tradition for nearly 1,000 years. The ancient stones of the castle provided a backdrop that connected the new mascot to centuries of Welsh military history, while the formal protocols of the ceremony demonstrated the serious attention that modern militaries pay to their symbolic traditions. Shenkin stood with remarkable composure as he was officially welcomed into the Royal Welsh Regiment, his new military collar bearing the battle honours that connected him to generations of military service. The early training of Shenkin IV revealed capabilities that built upon the lessons learned from his predecessors, while incorporating innovations developed through decades of experience with military goats. His handlers, drawing upon institutional knowledge that stretched back through multiple generations of mascots, implemented training protocols that had been refined through careful observation of previous animals. The young goat's natural intelligence and apparent eagerness to please made him an ideal student for the complex requirements of military life. The daily routine that governed Shenkin IV's life reflected both traditional military values and modern understanding of animal welfare. His morning grooming was conducted according to regulations that had been developed over centuries, but modified to incorporate contemporary knowledge about goat health and behavior. The attention paid to his diet, exercise, and medical care demonstrated the British Army's commitment to maintaining the highest standards of animal welfare while preserving important military traditions. The appointment of a new goat major to oversee Shenkin IV's care continued a tradition that had become one of the most specialized roles in the British military. This officer, selected for expertise in both military protocol and animal management, became responsible for every aspect of the goat's military career. The relationship between Shenkin and his goat major developed into a partnership that demonstrated the sophisticated level of training and care that modern military animals receive. The ceremonial duties that Shenkin IV began to perform included some of the most prestigious events in the British military calendar. His participation in the annual St. David's Day Parade, where he traditionally consumed a leek in celebration of Welsh heritage, became one of the most photographed military ceremonies in Britain. His ability to maintain dignity while participating in this unusual ritual demonstrated both his training and his natural adaptability to military requirements. The technological aspects of modern military service presented Shenkin IV with challenges that his predecessors could never have imagined. The integration of advanced communication systems, sophisticated security protocols, and complex logistics required him to adapt to an environment that was far more technologically demanding than anything previous military mascots had encountered. His calm response to electronic equipment, vehicle noise, and crowd control measures demonstrated the effectiveness of modern military animal training. The public relations aspects of Shenkin IV's service reflected the changing role of military mascots in the social media age. His appearances at public events were carefully planned to maximize positive exposure for the Royal Welsh Regiment while maintaining the dignity and respect that military traditions require. Professional photography and video documentation of his service created a comprehensive record of military animal life that provides valuable insights for future training programs. The international duties that came with Shenkin IV's position included representation of the British Army at foreign military ceremonies and participation in joint training exercises with Allied forces. His ability to maintain military bearing during these high-pressure international events demonstrated a level of professional competence that impressed foreign military observers. These appearances helped showcase British military traditions while building relationships with international partners. The welfare protocols that governed Shenkin IV's care reflected decades of accumulated knowledge about the health and behavioral needs of military animals. Regular veterinary examinations, specialized dietary management, and enrichment activities ensured that he remained in peak physical and psychological condition throughout his service. The comprehensive care he received set new standards for military animal welfare that influenced policies throughout the British Armed Forces. The training innovations that emerged during Shenkin IV's early service included new approaches to stress management, crowd control, and ceremonial behavior that built upon lessons learned from previous mascots. His responses to various training stimuli provided valuable data about goat psychology and learning capabilities that contributed to broader understanding of animal cognition and behavior modification. This research helped refine training protocols for future military animals. The media attention that accompanied Shenkin IV's service brought unprecedented visibility to the tradition of military mascots, while highlighting the professional standards that modern armies maintain for their animal personnel. Coverage of his training, ceremonial duties, and daily care provided the public with insights into military life that helped build understanding and support for armed forces traditions. His photogenic appearance and apparent enjoyment of military service made him an ideal ambassador for the Royal Welsh Regiment. The educational value of Shenkin IV's service extended to school visits, charity events, and public appearances that helped teach young people about military history and tradition. His calm demeanor and obvious training made him an effective teaching tool for explaining concepts of discipline, responsibility, and service to audiences who might have little direct contact with military life. These educational programs helped build bridges between military and civilian communities. The ceremonial equipment that Shenkin IV wore during formal events represented centuries of military tradition adapted for modern requirements. His dress collar, bearing regimental insignia and battle honors, was crafted according to specifications that balanced historical accuracy with contemporary safety and comfort standards. The careful attention paid to every detail of his ceremonial appearance demonstrated the respect and pride that the Royal Welsh Regiment invested in their mascot tradition. The legacy that Shenkin IV began building from his first days of service reflected both respect for tradition and adaptation to contemporary requirements. His service demonstrated that military customs could evolve to meet modern standards while maintaining their essential character and meaning. The careful balance between preserving historical practices and incorporating new knowledge about animal welfare showed how military organizations could honor their past while embracing positive change. The future prospects for Shenkin IV's career include continued service with the Royal Welsh Regiment, participation in major military ceremonies, and representation of British military traditions at events around the world. His training and development continue under the guidance of experienced handlers who understand both the requirements of military service and the needs of the remarkable animal who has inherited one of the most unique positions in the CRIM, British Army. Today, when Shenkin IV stands at attention during ceremonial parades, he embodies centuries of Welsh military tradition while representing the modern British Army's commitment to excellence in all aspects of military service. His story continues to unfold as he builds upon the legacy of his predecessors while establishing new standards for the military animals who will follow in his footsteps. The cream-colored goat who inherited a royal appointment carries forward traditions that connect contemporary military service to the ancient heritage of Welsh martial valor. Corporal Derby, XXXI Ram of the MERCIAN Regiment, in the windswept moors of Derbyshire, where Swaledale sheep have grazed for centuries beneath skies that change from brilliant blue to storm grey in the span of minutes, a young ram was developing the sturdy constitution and independent spirit that would mark him as worthy of one of the most ancient mascot traditions in the British Army. Derby, 22, as he would come to be known, was born into a lineage that stretched back to 1858, when the first ram of his line began serving with what would eventually become the MERCIAN regiment. His bloodline carried not just the physical characteristics of superior Swaledale breeding, but the accumulated genetic memory of generations of rams who had served their country with distinction. The Swaledale breed itself seemed designed by nature for military service. These hardy sheep had evolved in the harsh conditions of the Yorkshire Dales and surrounding regions, developing the resilience and calm temperament that made them ideal for the demands of military life. Their thick, weather-resistant fleeces and robust constitutions allowed them to thrive in conditions that would challenge other breeds, while their natural alertness and intelligence made them responsive to training and suitable for ceremonial duties. The tradition that Derby XXXII inherited was one of the most carefully maintained in British military history. Each successive ram in the Derby lineage had been selected not just for breeding and conformation, but for temperament and bearing that would reflect credit on the regiment they served. The numerical designation that followed each ram's name represented not just chronological succession, but a legacy of service that connected each animal to every predecessor who had worn the regimental collar. The selection process for Derby XXXII involved extensive evaluation by military officials, veterinary experts, and sheep breeding specialists who understood both the requirements of military service and the characteristics that distinguished superior Swaledale rams. The candidate had to demonstrate the calm demeanor necessary for public appearances, the intelligence required for ceremonial training, and the physical presence appropriate for representing one of Britain's most distinguished military units. The induction ceremony for Derby XXXII was conducted at Chatsworth House, the magnificent Derbyshire estate that had served as the spiritual home of the Derby lineage for generations. The formal gardens and historic architecture provided a backdrop that connected the new mascot to centuries of British military tradition, while the participation of regimental veterans demonstrated the continuity that made this tradition meaningful to those who had served. Derby stood with remarkable composure as he received his regimental collar, his bearing suggesting that he understood the significance of the moment. The daily routine that governed Derby XXXII's life reflected the accumulated wisdom of more than a century and a half of ram mascot management. His care was overseen by handlers who had inherited knowledge passed down through generations of military personnel, knowledge that encompassed everything from optimal diet and exercise to the behavioral patterns that indicated stress or illness. The attention paid to every aspect of his welfare demonstrated the British Army's commitment to maintaining the highest standards of animal care while preserving important traditions. The training regimen that Derby XXII underwent was based on protocols that had been refined through decades of experience with Swaledale rams in military service. His handlers understood that sheep psychology differed significantly from that of other military animals, requiring training approaches that respected their natural behavioral patterns while developing the skills necessary for ceremonial duties. The young ram's intelligence and apparent willingness to cooperate made him an ideal student for these specialized requirements. The annual birthday promotion ceremony became the highlight of Derby XXXII's military calendar, a tradition that connected him to every predecessor who had served the regiment. Held at Chatsworth House with full military honors, these ceremonies attracted veterans from throughout the MERCIAN regiment who wanted to participate in one of their unit's most cherished traditions. Derby's promotion from private to lance corporal, and eventually to corporal, was conducted with the same formality accorded to human personnel, emphasizing the serious attention that the military paid to its mascot traditions. The ceremonial duties that Derby XXXII performed included participation in regimental celebrations, public parades, and formal military ceremonies that showcased the traditions and capabilities of the MERCIAN regiment. His ability to maintain appropriate behavior during these events, despite the crowds, noise, and confusion that often accompanied such occasions, demonstrated both his training and his natural temperament. Foreign military observers frequently commented on the discipline and bearing that British military animals displayed, with Derby serving as a prime example of these standards. The seasonal rhythm of Derby XXXII's military service reflected both the requirements of ceremonial duties and the natural needs of Swaledale sheep. His summer grooming included the traditional wool shearing ceremony that had become part of regimental tradition, with the wool being preserved as a symbol of his service and contribution to military heritage. This annual ritual demonstrated the integration of practical sheep husbandry with military ceremony, creating traditions that honored both animal welfare and military custom. The educational aspects of Derby 32's service included school visits, charity events, and public appearances that helped teach young people about military history and the role of tradition in modern society. His calm presence and obvious training made him an effective teaching tool for explaining concepts of service, duty, and the connection between past and present. These educational programs helped build understanding between military and civilian communities while preserving knowledge about Britain's agricultural and military heritage. The veterinary care that Derby XXXII received throughout his service represented the application of both traditional sheep husbandry knowledge and modern veterinary science. Regular health examinations, preventive care protocols, and specialized dietary management ensured that he remained in peak condition throughout his military career. The comprehensive medical records maintained during his service provided valuable data about the health requirements of sheep in military service environments. The ceremonial equipment that Derby XXXII wore during formal events represented the evolution of military tradition through successive generations of ram mascots. His regimental collar, bearing battle honors and insignia that told the story of the MERCIAN regiment's service, was crafted according to specifications that balanced historical accuracy with contemporary safety requirements. The careful attention paid to every detail of his ceremonial appearance demonstrated the pride and respect that the regiment invested in their mascot tradition. The social aspects of Derby 30 service extended beyond formal ceremonies to include informal interactions with military personnel that helped build unit cohesion and morale. His presence at regimental gatherings, his participation in training exercises, and his availability for individual interaction with soldiers demonstrated the multiple roles that military mascots play in supporting the psychological and social needs of military communities. The international recognition that came with Derby XXXII's service included representation of British military traditions at foreign ceremonies and participation in joint exercises with Allied forces. His ability to maintain military bearing during these international events helped showcase British military excellence while building relationships with international partners. These appearances demonstrated that military traditions could serve diplomatic as well as ceremonial purposes. The legacy preservation efforts that surrounded Derby XXXII's service included documentation of training protocols, care procedures, and ceremonial practices that would ensure continuity for future generations of ram mascots. Photography, video recording, and detailed written records created a comprehensive archive of military animal service that would inform future policies and practices. This documentation effort recognized that traditions must be actively preserved to remain meaningful. The retirement planning for Derby XXXII reflected the British Army's commitment to ensuring appropriate care for military animals throughout their entire lives. Arrangements for his eventual transition to civilian life included consideration of his social needs, dietary requirements, and the psychological adjustment required when leaving military service. These preparations demonstrated that military animal welfare extended beyond active service to include responsibility for their entire lifespan. Today, when Derby X32 stands at attention during regimental ceremonies, he embodies more than a century and a half of British military tradition while representing the modern Army's commitment to excellence in all aspects of military service. His story continues the remarkable lineage of Swaledale Rams who have served their country with distinction, each building upon the legacy of his predecessors while establishing new standards for the military animals who will follow. The sturdy ram who inherited an ancient tradition carries forward customs that connect contemporary military service to the enduring values of British martial heritage. Sergeant, Crispin Household Cavalry Drum Horse. In the misty pastures of Ireland, where the gentle rolling hills have nurtured some of the world's finest horses for countless generations, a magnificent foal was beginning life, with no knowledge that he would one day stand before Buckingham Palace, carrying the most prestigious drums in the British Army. Crispin was born from the careful crossing of a Shire mare and a Clydesdale stallion, his breeding designed to produce the massive size and calm temperament essential for one of the most demanding roles in military pageantry. His dark bay coat gleamed with the health and vigor that marked him as exceptional even among the heavy horses of his native land. The tradition that Crispin would inherit stretched back to the earliest days of mounted warfare, when cavalry units used kettle drums, not just for ceremony, but for battlefield communication. The deep, resonant tones of these massive instruments could carry across the noise of battle, providing signals that coordinated cavalry movements and maintained unit cohesion in the chaos of combat. Though warfare had evolved far beyond the age of mounted charges, the household cavalry maintained their drum horses as living links to centuries of British military heritage. The selection process for a household cavalry drum horse involved considerations that went far beyond breeding and conformation. The candidate had to demonstrate not just the physical ability to carry the enormous silver kettle drums that weighed nearly 100 pounds, but the psychological stability to perform in front of massive crowds while maintaining the precise timing essential for military bands. Crispin's early training revealed an intelligence and composure that suggested he possessed the rare combination of qualities necessary for this most prestigious of military roles. The journey from Irish pasture to London barracks required Crispin to adapt to an environment completely different from his rural birthplace. The sounds and smells of urban military life, the constant traffic of central London, the close quarters of historic stables, the daily presence of hundreds of tourists created challenges that tested his adaptability and temperament. His handlers, experienced in managing the transition of heavy horses to military service, guided him through this adjustment with patience and expertise developed over generations of cavalry tradition. The early stages of Crispin's training focused on developing the fundamental skills that would enable him to carry drums during ceremonial duties. Unlike ordinary riding horses, drum horses must learn to move with perfect rhythm and timing, their gait synchronized to the musical requirements of military bands. Crispin's natural intelligence and apparent musical sensitivity made him an ideal student for this specialized training, as he seemed to understand that his movement must complement rather than compete with the drums he carried. The process of accustoming Crispin to the massive silver kettle drums that would define his military career required months of careful conditioning. These historic instruments, some dating back centuries, were works of art as well as functional equipment, their silver surfaces polished to mirror brightness and decorated with regimental insignia that told the story of British cavalry tradition. Crispin's calm acceptance of their weight and his ability to move gracefully while carrying them demonstrated both his physical capabilities and his psychological suitability for ceremonial duties. The appointment to the rank of sergeant reflected not just Crispin's successful completion of training, but recognition of the prestigious role he would play in British military ceremony. This promotion was conducted with full military honors, emphasizing the serious attention that the household cavalry paid to their drum horse tradition. The ceremony included the presentation of golden reins and ceremonial tack that marked his elevation to one of the most visible positions in the British Army. The daily routine that governed Crispin's life reflected the precision and attention to detail that characterized household cavalry standards. His morning preparation involved grooming, conducted according to regulations that specified everything from the shine of his coat to the placement of his ceremonial tack. The soldiers responsible for his care were among the finest horsemen in the British Army, men whose expertise had been developed through years of training in one of the world's most demanding cavalry units. The ceremonial duties that defined Crispin's military career included participation in some of the most important events in British national life. Trooping the Colour, the annual ceremony celebrating the monarch's birthday, placed him at the centre of pageantry watched by millions around the world. His ability to maintain perfect timing and bearing while carrying drums during this complex ceremony demonstrated both his training and his natural suitability for military service at the highest level. The technical aspects of drum carrying required Crispin to master skills that few horses ever develop. The kettle drums attached to his saddle had to be positioned with mathematical precision to ensure proper sound projection and visual symmetry. His movement had to accommodate the physics of these massive instruments, while maintaining the grace and dignity expected of household cavalry horses. The drummers who rode alongside him depended on his steady gait to provide the platform necessary for their musical performance. The international recognition that came with Crispin's service included representation of British military excellence at state visits and diplomatic ceremonies. Foreign dignitaries frequently commented on the precision and magnificence of British military pageantry, with the drum horses serving as symbols of the tradition and professionalism that characterized the British armed forces. These appearances helped project British soft power while maintaining relationships with international partners. The welfare protocols that governed Crispin's care reflected both traditional horsemanship knowledge and modern veterinary science. The physical demands of carrying heavy drums during long ceremonies required careful attention to his musculoskeletal health, while the psychological stresses of performing before large crowds necessitated monitoring of his behavioral indicators. The comprehensive care he received set standards for military animal welfare that influenced practices throughout the British Army. The musical education that formed part of Crispin's training involved exposure to the full range of military music that he would encounter during his ceremonial duties. His handlers noted his apparent ability to recognize different pieces and adjust his gait accordingly, suggesting a level of musical sensitivity that went beyond simple conditioning. This musical awareness made him an ideal partner for the skilled drummers of the household cavalry bands. The photographic documentation of Crispin's service created a comprehensive record of modern military ceremony that provides valuable insights into the role of tradition in contemporary armed forces. Professional photographers captured every aspect of his duties, from the careful preparation in Hyde Park Barracks to the culminating moments of major state ceremonies. These images serve as both historical records and training materials for future generations of cavalry personnel. The technological adaptations required for modern ceremonial duties included integration with sophisticated sound systems, television broadcasting equipment, and security protocols that would have been unimaginable to earlier generations of drum horses. Crispin's calm response to electronic equipment, camera crews, and the complex logistics of modern state ceremonies demonstrated the adaptability of well-trained military animals to contemporary requirements. The educational value of Crispin's service extended to public appearances at schools, military museums, and community events that helped teach about British military history and tradition. His presence provided tangible connection to centuries of cavalry heritage while demonstrating the ongoing relevance of tradition in modern military service. These educational programs helped build bridges between military and civilian communities while preserving important cultural knowledge. The maintenance of ceremonial equipment associated with Crispin's service required specialized skills that connected modern military personnel to their historical predecessors. The silver kettle drums, golden reins, and elaborate tack demanded daily attention from craftsmen whose expertise had been passed down through generations of cavalry service. This preservation of traditional skills ensured continuity in standards that defined household cavalry excellence. The legacy planning for Crispin's eventual retirement reflected the British Army's commitment to ensuring appropriate care for military animals throughout their lives. Arrangements for his transition from active service included consideration of his specialized needs, and the psychological adjustment required when leaving the structured environment of military duty. These preparations demonstrated institutional responsibility that extended beyond operational requirements to encompass lifetime welfare obligations. Today, when Sergeant Crispin stands at attention during state ceremonies, his massive frame draped in ceremonial tack and topped by gleaming silver drums, he embodies centuries of British military tradition while representing the modern Army's commitment to excellence in all aspects of service. The thunderous roll of drums carried on his back echoes across the mall, connecting contemporary observers to the ancient heritage of mounted warfare, while demonstrating that some traditions remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago. His story continues to unfold as he maintains standards that honor both the past and the present, carrying forward customs that make military service meaningful beyond its purely functional requirements. Colonel-in-Chief Sir NILS, OLAV III, the Edinburgh Penguin. In the frigid waters of the South Atlantic, where Antarctic currents carry icebergs northward through seas that have remained virtually unchanged since the dawn of time, a young king penguin was beginning life, with no understanding that he would one day achieve the highest military rank ever held by a non-human in the Norwegian Armed Forces. Sir Nils Olav III, as he would eventually be known, possessed the distinctive orange and yellow plumage markings that identified him as a superior specimen of his species, with the robust constitution and calm temperament that would make him suitable for one of the most unusual military appointments in modern history. The extraordinary tradition that brought Nils Olav into military service began in 1972, when the Norwegian King's Guard visited Edinburgh Zoo during the Edinburgh Military Tattoo. The connection between Norway and Scotland, forged through centuries of shared Nordic heritage and strengthened by common service in NATO, provided the foundation for what would become one of the most enduring partnerships between a military unit and an animal mascot. The original Nils Olav, named after King Olav V of Norway and Lieutenant Nils Egelian, who proposed the adoption, established a tradition that would span multiple generations of both penguins and Norwegian soldiers. The selection of a king penguin for this honorary role reflected both practical and symbolic considerations. King penguins, among the most impressive of their species, possessed the size and bearing that would make them suitable representatives of military dignity. Their natural behaviors standing at attention for extended periods, moving in formation-like groups, and maintaining social hierarchies seemed to mirror military customs in ways that made the partnership feel natural and appropriate. The appointment process for Nils Olav III involved ceremony and protocol that demonstrated the serious attention Norwegian military authorities paid to this unique tradition. The formal documents appointing him to his position were prepared with the same care accorded to human military personnel, complete with official seals and signatures from the highest levels of Norwegian command. His military record, maintained by Edinburgh Zoo in cooperation with Norwegian authorities, documented his service with the same attention to detail applied to any military career. The daily routine that governed Nils Olav III's life reflected both the natural requirements of king penguins and the ceremonial expectations of his military role. His care was overseen by Edinburgh Zoo staff, who understood both penguin biology and the symbolic importance of their charge. The attention paid to his health, behavior, and public presentation demonstrated the commitment required to maintain traditions that bridge the gap between military service and wildlife conservation. The ceremonial inspections that marked the highlights of Nils Olav III's military career occurred whenever the Norwegian King's Guard visited Edinburgh. These formal events, conducted with full military protocol, included the Penguin's review of honor guards composed of some of Norway's finest soldiers. His participation in these ceremonies, waddling slowly along the ranks of perfectly aligned guardsmen, created images that captured the imagination of observers around the world while maintaining the dignity appropriate to serious military tradition. The promotion ceremonies that elevated Nils Olav III through successive military ranks were conducted with formality that emphasized the genuine respect Norwegian forces held for their unusual mascot. His progression from Lance Corporal to Colonel-in-Chief spanned decades of faithful service, with each promotion marked by formal documentation and ceremonial recognition. The 2016 ceremony that elevated him to Brigadier and the subsequent 2023 promotion to Colonel-in-Chief represented the culmination of a military career unlike any other in modern history. The knighthood bestowed upon Nils Olav III in 2008 made him the first Penguin to receive such an honor, adding a chivalric dimension to his already extraordinary military career. The ceremony, conducted by Norwegian officials at Edinburgh Zoo, included the presentation of a sword and formal declaration of his knight status. This recognition placed him among the most highly decorated animals in military history, while establishing precedents for the recognition of non-human service that influenced policies in other nations. The international attention that accompanied Nils Olav III's various promotions and honors brought unprecedented visibility to both Norwegian military traditions and wildlife conservation efforts. Media coverage of his ceremonies reached millions of people worldwide, creating opportunities to educate the public about both military heritage and the importance of protecting endangered species. His dual role as military mascot and conservation ambassador demonstrated the potential for creative partnerships between military organizations and environmental institutions. The diplomatic functions that Nils Olav III performed extended beyond ceremonial duties to include representation of Norwegian values and traditions at international events. His presence at military ceremonies helped showcase Norwegian military excellence while building relationships with allied forces. Foreign military personnel frequently expressed admiration for the creativity and dedication that Norwegian forces demonstrated through their maintenance of this unique tradition. The conservation impact of Nils Olav III's celebrity status provided unexpected benefits for king penguin research and protection efforts. The attention focused on him through his military role helped fund conservation programs and educational initiatives that might otherwise have struggled for support. His story became a vehicle for teaching about Antarctic ecosystems, climate change impacts, and the importance of protecting marine environments that support penguin populations. The welfare protocols developed for Nils Olav III's care reflected both advancing knowledge of penguin biology and the special requirements of his military role. Edinburgh Zoo's penguin specialists worked with Norwegian military advisors to ensure that ceremonial duties never compromised his health or natural behaviors. The comprehensive care protocols developed during his service established new standards for the management of honorary military animals that influenced practices at other institutions. The educational programs that featured Nils Olav III reached audiences around the world through school visits, documentary films, and interactive presentations that used his story to teach about military history, international cooperation, and wildlife conservation. His unique position allowed educators to address multiple subjects through a single, engaging narrative that captured student attention while delivering important lessons about service, tradition, and environmental responsibility. The ceremonial equipment designed for Nils Olav III's military duties required creative adaptation of traditional military insignia to accommodate penguin anatomy and behavior. His military collar, bearing Norwegian insignia and rank indicators, was designed to be comfortable and safe while maintaining the visual impact necessary for ceremonial purposes. The careful attention paid to these details demonstrated the commitment required to maintain military traditions while respecting animal welfare requirements. The media management surrounding Nils Olav III's service required coordination between Norwegian military authorities, Edinburgh Zoo officials, and international press organizations that were fascinated by his story. Professional photography and videography documented every aspect of his ceremonial duties, creating archives that preserved both military history and important records of king penguin behavior and biology. The scientific value of observations made during Nils Olav III's long career provided researchers with unprecedented data about king penguin longevity, behavior, and adaptation to captive environments. His responses to ceremonial events, interaction with human personnel, and adaptation to public attention contributed to broader understanding of penguin psychology and intelligence that informed both conservation efforts and captive management practices. The legacy planning for Nils Olav III's eventual succession involved careful consideration of how to maintain traditions that had become important to both Norwegian military culture and international relations. Arrangements for identifying and training his eventual successor ensured continuity in customs that had grown beyond their original ceremonial purposes to become symbols of international cooperation and creative thinking in military affairs. The architectural accommodations made at Edinburgh Zoo to support Nils Olav III's military duties included specialized facilities for conducting ceremonies and hosting Norwegian military personnel during their visits. The penguin enclosure was modified to provide appropriate staging areas for formal inspections while maintaining the naturalistic environment necessary for penguin welfare. These adaptations demonstrated the institutional commitment required to support long-term military traditions. Today, when Colonel-in-Chief Sir Nils Olav III stands at attention during inspections of the Norwegian King's Guard, his compact form, embodying decades of military tradition while representing the creative spirit that characterizes modern military organizations. His slow, dignified waddle along the ranks of Norwegian soldiers creates moments of levity that remind observers that military service, while serious in purpose, need not be devoid of joy and creativity. His story continues to evolve as he maintains traditions that honor both military heritage and the natural world, proving that the most meaningful partnerships often emerge from the most unexpected sources. Chief Petty Officer K-Dog Bottlenose Minehunter. In the warm waters of San Diego Bay, where the Pacific Ocean meets one of America's most important naval installations, a young bottlenose dolphin was developing the intelligence and aquatic skills that would make him one of the most sophisticated military assets in the United States Navy. K-Dog, as he would come to be known, possessed the natural echolocation abilities and problem-solving intelligence that had made bottlenose dolphins legendary among marine mammals. With the calm temperament and apparent willingness to work with humans that would make him suitable for one of the most dangerous missions in naval warfare. The U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program that recruited K-Dog represented one of the most innovative approaches to military challenges ever attempted by American forces. Beginning in the 1960s, Navy researchers had recognized that certain marine mammals possessed natural abilities that far exceeded anything human technology could duplicate. Dolphins' sophisticated biosonar systems could detect underwater objects with precision that surpassed the most advanced mechanical sensors, while their intelligence and trainability made them capable of learning complex missions that would challenge human divers. The selection process for dolphins entering the Marine Mammal Program involved extensive evaluation of both physical capabilities and psychological suitability for military service. K-Dog demonstrated the exceptional echolocation abilities necessary for mine detection work, along with the social intelligence and apparent desire to work with human trainers that made him an ideal candidate for advanced mission training. His natural curiosity and problem-solving abilities suggested that he would adapt well to the complex requirements of military diving operations. The early training that K-Dog underwent at the Naval Ocean Systems Center in San Diego revealed capabilities that impressed even veteran animal trainers. His ability to learn complex sequences of behaviors, to distinguish between different types of underwater objects, and to communicate his findings to human handlers demonstrated intelligence that went far beyond simple conditioning. The sophisticated hand signals and underwater communication systems that he mastered enabled precise coordination between dolphin and human during dangerous diving operations. The mine detection missions that defined K-Dog's military career required him to locate and mark underwater explosive devices that posed lethal threats to naval vessels and commercial shipping. His natural echolocation abilities allowed him to identify mines buried in seafloor sediment or camouflaged among underwater debris, detecting threats that human divers and mechanical sensors might miss. The precision of his sonar and his ability to work in murky water or complete darkness made him invaluable for clearing harbors and shipping channels of explosive hazards. The 2003 deployment to the Persian Gulf marked the pinnacle of K-Dog's military service, as he participated in the largest maritime mine-clearing operation since World War II. The shallow waters of the Gulf, contaminated with mines and underwater obstacles left over from previous conflicts, presented hazards that threatened the massive naval forces assembled for Operation Iraqi Freedom. K-Dog and his fellow marine mammals were tasked with ensuring that these vital waterways could be safely navigated by military and humanitarian vessels. The daily routine of mine detection work required K-Dog to maintain peak physical condition while developing the mental focus necessary for life-or-death underwater missions. His training included simulated mine detection exercises, long-distance swimming to build endurance, and coordination drills with human dive teams who would remove or detonate the explosive devices he located. The bond between K-Dog and his human handlers became crucial for mission success, as clear communication could mean the difference between successful mine clearance and catastrophic explosion. The rank structure that governed K-Dog's military status reflected the Navy's recognition that marine mammals were genuine military personnel rather than mere equipment. The tradition of awarding dolphins ranks one level above their primary handlers ensured appropriate respect for animals whose work required intelligence, training, and courage that paralleled human military service. K-Dog's promotion to Chief Petty Officer recognized both his exceptional service record and his role as a senior member of the Marine Mammal Program. The technological integration required for K-Dog's missions included sophisticated underwater communication systems, specialized diving equipment, and GPS tracking devices that allowed precise coordination with surface vessels and human dive teams. His ability to work with complex electronic equipment while maintaining the natural behaviors essential for effective mine detection demonstrated the adaptability that made marine mammals effective military assets in the high-tech environment of modern naval warfare. The conservation implications of K-Dog's military service extended beyond immediate operational requirements to include broader questions about marine mammal welfare and the environmental impact of naval activities. The comprehensive veterinary care and behavioral monitoring that he received set new standards for military animal welfare while contributing to scientific understanding of dolphin biology and psychology. His service helped bridge the gap between military necessity and environmental responsibility. The international attention that K-Dog's missions attracted brought unprecedented visibility to the U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program, while raising important questions about the ethics and effectiveness of using animals in military operations. Media coverage of his deployments provided the public with insights into one of the military's most classified programs, while highlighting the remarkable intelligence and capabilities of marine mammals. This attention helped build support for both military animal programs and marine conservation efforts. The training innovations that emerged during K-Dog's career included new approaches to underwater communication, mine detection protocols, and human-animal coordination that influenced military animal programs worldwide. His responses to various training stimuli provided valuable data about dolphin learning capabilities and communication systems that contributed to broader understanding of marine mammal cognition. This research helped refine training protocols for future generations of military dolphins. The welfare protocols developed for K-Dog's care reflected both advancing knowledge of dolphin biology and the special requirements of military service in challenging environments. The Navy's marine mammal specialists worked with leading cetacean researchers to ensure that operational duties never compromised his health or natural behaviors. The comprehensive care he received included specialized diet management, environmental enrichment, and medical monitoring that exceeded standards at most marine parks and research facilities. The operational security requirements surrounding KDOG's missions necessitated careful balance between military secrecy and public transparency about animal welfare standards. While specific details of his operations remained classified, the Navy maintained open policies about general training methods and care protocols that allowed public oversight of animal welfare issues. This transparency helped build trust between military authorities and animal welfare advocates who were concerned about potential misuse of marine mammals. The retirement planning for KDOG reflected the Navy's commitment to providing appropriate care for military animals throughout their entire lives. Unlike human military personnel who could transition to civilian careers, dolphins required specialized facilities and expert care that could accommodate their unique needs. The comprehensive retirement programs developed for marine mammal veterans established new standards for institutional responsibility that influenced military animal policies across all services. The scientific contributions that emerged from KDOG's service included advances in understanding dolphin echolocation, learning capabilities, and stress responses that benefited both military applications and marine mammal conservation efforts. Research conducted during his training and deployment provided insights into dolphin psychology and intelligence that influenced policies for wild dolphin protection and captive dolphin management. His service helped demonstrate that military and conservation goals could be mutually supportive when properly managed. The legacy of Chief Petty Officer KDOG extends far beyond his individual service record to encompass broader questions about the relationship between humans and intelligent animals in military contexts. His career demonstrated that with appropriate training, care, and respect, marine mammals could serve as genuine partners in military operations rather than mere tools or weapons. The standards he helped establish for military animal welfare continue to influence policies and practices throughout the American military. Today, when Navy marine mammals participate in training exercises in San Diego Bay, they carry forward traditions that KDOG helped establish during his years of distinguished service. His story reminds us that military effectiveness can be enhanced through creative partnerships with other species, and that the most successful military operations often emerge from understanding and respecting the natural capabilities of all participants. The dolphin who helped clear Persian Gulf waters of deadly mines proved that intelligence, training, and dedication to mission success know no species boundaries, and that the bonds forged between humans and animals in service of their country can be as strong and meaningful as any military partnership. Sergeant Major FOSCO Paratrooper on 4 PAWS. Above the sprawling landscape of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where the summer heat shimmers off airfield tarmac and the constant drone of aircraft engines provides the background soundtrack to one of America's most elite military installations, a German shepherd named FOSCO was preparing to make military history. It was September 2009, and the 101st Airborne Division was about to witness something that had never been attempted before. A tandem parachute jump from 500 feet with a military working dog as an active participant rather than passive cargo. FOSCO, whose dark sable coat and intelligent amber eyes marked him as exceptional even among the highly trained dogs of the military working dog program, was about to become the first canine to earn his wings through an actual free-fall parachute jump. The concept of airborne qualified military dogs had been discussed in special operations circles for years, but the technical and safety challenges had always seemed insurmountable. Military working dogs had been transported by aircraft countless times, but always as cargo, secured in kennels or transport containers that provided safety, but no operational capability upon landing. The idea of a dog who could participate in actual parachute operations, who could be deployed alongside human paratroopers and immediately ready for mission execution, represented a revolutionary advance in military animal capabilities. The selection of FOSCO for this groundbreaking experiment was based on extensive evaluation of both his psychological profile and his physical capabilities. Military working dogs require exceptional nerve and adaptability for their standard missions, but parachute operations demanded qualities that went far beyond normal requirements. FOSCO had demonstrated the calm temperament necessary to work under extreme stress, the intelligence required for complex training protocols, and the physical conditioning essential for the demands of free-fall parachuting. The training program that prepared FOSCO for his historic jump required months of careful conditioning and skill development that had no precedent in military animal training. Beginning with basic desensitization to aircraft noise and vibration, the program gradually introduced him to the sights, sounds, and sensations that he would experience during actual parachute operations. His natural intelligence and apparent trust in his human handlers made him an ideal student for training that required absolute cooperation and calm acceptance of completely unnatural situations. The development of specialized equipment for FOSCO's parachute training represented a triumph of military engineering and animal welfare considerations. The harness system that would secure him to his human tandem partner had to provide complete safety while allowing him to see and breathe normally during the descent. The protective eyewear designed for his use had to shield his eyes from wind blast while maintaining his ability to observe and orient during the jump. Every piece of equipment was tested exhaustively to ensure that it would function perfectly under the extreme conditions of free-fall parachuting. The psychological preparation that FOSCO underwent included exposure to simulated parachute conditions that helped him understand what to expect during actual operations. Wind tunnel training allowed him to experience the sensation of high-speed air movement in a controlled environment, while simulator exercises helped him adapt to the disorientation that accompanies rapid altitude changes. His calm response to these unprecedented training experiences demonstrated both his exceptional temperament and the effectiveness of the conditioning program. The day of FOSCO's historic jump dawned clear and calm, with perfect conditions for the complex operation that would make military history. The aircraft that carried him and his human partner to altitude was a C-130 Hercules, the workhorse transport plane that had carried countless paratroopers into combat operations around the world. As the plane climbed toward the planned jump altitude, FOSCO remained calm and alert, his behavior suggesting that he understood the significance of what was about to happen. The final equipment checks before the jump included verification of every system that would ensure FOSCO's safety during the descent. His harness was inspected multiple times to confirm proper fit and security, while his protective gear was checked to ensure that it would function correctly during the high-speed descent. The human jumpmaster, who would serve as his tandem partner, was among the most experienced parachutists in the 101st Airborne, selected specifically for his expertise in complex parachute operations and his ability to work with animals under stress. The moment of exit from the aircraft marked the beginning of an experience unlike anything any dog had ever undergone. The transition from the relative stability of the aircraft interior to the violent turbulence of free fall required FOSCO to maintain complete trust in his equipment and his human partner while experiencing sensations that no amount of training could fully prepare him for. The wind blast that accompanied their exit from the aircraft would have been overwhelming for most animals, but FOSCO's conditioning and temperament allowed him to remain calm and cooperative throughout the descent. The free-fall portion of the jump lasted nearly a minute, during which FOSCO and his partner plummeted through the sky at speeds approaching 120 miles per hour. The sensation of weightlessness, the rush of wind, and the gradually approaching earth below created an experience that challenged every instinct developed through millions of years of evolution. Yet FOSCO's behavior during this unprecedented descent suggested that he had adapted to these alien conditions with remarkable composure, maintaining the calm alertness that characterized his approach to all military operations. The parachute deployment that marked the transition from free fall to controlled descent required precise timing and technique to ensure the safety of both human and canine participants. The sudden deceleration that accompanied the parachute's opening subjected both jumpers to forces that could be disorienting even for experienced human paratroopers. FOSCO's calm response to this dramatic change in motion demonstrated both the effectiveness of his training and his exceptional psychological stability under extreme conditions. The final approach and landing required coordination between the human jumpmaster and ground support personnel who were positioned to assist with what was essentially an experimental procedure. The landing zone had been carefully selected to provide maximum safety margins while allowing documentation of this historic achievement. As FOSCO and his partner touched down on the designated drop zone, they made military history while establishing precedents that would influence special operations planning for years to come. The immediate aftermath of FOSCO's successful jump included comprehensive medical evaluation to ensure that he had suffered no adverse effects from his unprecedented experience. Veterinary specialists, who had been standing by throughout the operation, conducted thorough examinations to verify that the stresses of parachute operations had not compromised his health or behavior. Their findings confirmed that properly trained and equipped military working dogs could participate in parachute operations without significant risk to their welfare. The promotion ceremony that elevated FOSCO to Sergeant Major rank recognized not just his historic parachute jump, but his overall contributions to military working dog capabilities and special operations development. The ceremony was conducted with full military honors, emphasizing the serious attention that the 101st Airborne Division paid to recognizing exceptional service regardless of species. His new rank placed him among the highest-ranking non-human soldiers in American military history, while acknowledging his role in advancing military animal capabilities. The training protocols that emerged from FOSCO's successful jump included comprehensive guidelines for preparing military working dogs for parachute operations, establishing safety standards and qualification requirements that would govern future programs. His experience provided valuable data about canine responses to extreme altitude, rapid decompression, and the physical stresses associated with parachute operations. This information contributed to the development of training programs that would allow other military working dogs to achieve airborne qualification. The international attention that FOSCO's achievement attracted brought unprecedented visibility to the capabilities of American military working dogs, while highlighting the innovative approaches that special operations forces bring to complex challenges. Media coverage of his historic jump reached audiences around the world, showcasing American military excellence while demonstrating the creative thinking that characterizes elite military units. Foreign military observers expressed admiration for the ingenuity and dedication that American forces displayed through this groundbreaking achievement. The legacy of Sergeant Major FOSCO extends far beyond his individual achievement to encompass broader questions about the potential for expanding military animal capabilities through creative training and innovative equipment development. His successful parachute jump proved that with appropriate preparation and equipment, military working dogs could participate in operations that had previously been limited to human personnel. The precedents he established continue to influence special operations planning and military animal training programs throughout the American military. Today, when military working dogs deploy with special operations forces around the world, they carry forward capabilities that FOSCO helped establish through his willingness to attempt something that had never been done before. His story reminds us that military effectiveness often emerges from challenging conventional assumptions and exploring new possibilities for human-animal cooperation. The German Shepherd who earned his wings at 12,500 feet proved that with proper training, appropriate equipment, and mutual trust between species, even the most ambitious military goals can be achieved through partnership and innovation. Sergeant Rexseed Hunter in the Triangle of Death. In the sprawling desert landscape south of Baghdad, where the Euphrates River winds through palm groves that have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, a German shepherd named Rex was beginning what would become one of the most dangerous and important missions in the Iraq War. It was 2004, and the region known as the Triangle of Death had earned its grim nickname through a relentless campaign of insurgent attacks that claimed the lives of American soldiers and Iraqi civilians with horrifying regularity. Rex, with his keen intelligence and natural alertness, was about to become the primary defense against the improvised explosive devices that had turned every road, every doorway, every pile of rubble into a potential death trap. The bond between Rex and Marine Corporal Mike Dowling began in the controlled environment of a training facility, but it would be forged in the crucible of combat operations where a single mistake could cost both their lives. Military working dog teams require a level of trust and communication that goes beyond ordinary human-animal relationships, as each partner's survival depends completely on the other's skill and dedication. Rex's natural intelligence and apparent understanding of the life-or-death nature of their work made him an ideal partner for operations in one of Iraq's most dangerous regions. The daily reality of explosive detection work in the Triangle of Death required Rex to maintain absolute focus while operating in conditions that would challenge the most experienced military personnel. The summer heat of the Iraqi desert, often exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit, created physical stress that tested the limits of both human and canine endurance. The constant threat of sniper attacks, mortar bombardments, and the very explosive devices they were seeking made every patrol a test of courage and professional competence. The training that prepared Rex for these life-or-death missions involved exposure to thousands of different explosive signatures, teaching him to recognize the chemical traces that betrayed the presence of hidden bombs. His remarkable olfactory capabilities, developed through millions of years of evolution and refined through careful breeding and training, allowed him to detect explosive materials in concentrations far below the threshold of any mechanical sensor. The precision of his nose and his ability to work in extreme heat and chaotic conditions made him invaluable for protecting convoys and clearing buildings of explosive threats. The partnership between Rex and Corporal Dowling developed into one of the most effective explosive detection teams in the Marine Corps, with a mission success rate that saved countless American and Iraqi lives. Their daily patrols took them through neighborhoods where every building might conceal a bomb. Every roadside object could trigger a devastating explosion, and every friendly face might belong to someone planning their deaths. In this environment of constant danger, the bond between human and dog became a lifeline that provided psychological strength as well as operational capability. The technical aspects of explosive detection work required Rex to distinguish between thousands of different chemical signatures while operating in environments contaminated with fuel fumes, cooking odors, industrial chemicals, and the general chaos of urban warfare. His ability to focus on specific explosive signatures amid this cacophony of competing scents demonstrated both his exceptional training and his natural talents. The precision required for this work left no margin for error, as false positives could delay crucial operations while missed explosives could result in casualties. The psychological stress of constant exposure to life-threatening situations affected both human and canine members of explosive detection teams, requiring careful monitoring of stress indicators and implementation of protocols designed to maintain operational effectiveness while preserving mental health. Rex's handlers noted his apparent understanding of the seriousness of their missions, as he would display increased alertness and focus when approaching areas known to be dangerous. This situational awareness suggested an intelligence that went beyond simple conditioning to include genuine comprehension of tactical situations. The combat operations that Rex participated in during his deployment included some of the most intense fighting of the Iraq War, as insurgent forces concentrated their efforts on disrupting American operations through increasingly sophisticated explosive attacks. His presence during these operations provided both practical explosive detection capabilities and psychological comfort to Marines who understood that their survival often depended on his ability to locate hidden bombs before they could detonate. The daily routine that governed Rex's life during combat deployment reflected the harsh realities of military operations in a hostile environment. His care was provided by Marines who understood that maintaining his health and effectiveness was crucial for unit survival, leading to attention to his welfare that exceeded peacetime standards. The water, food, and medical care he received were carefully managed to ensure peak performance despite the challenging conditions of desert warfare. The innovations in explosive detection techniques that emerged during Rex's deployment included new approaches to building searches, vehicle inspections, and route clearance operations that influenced military working dog programs throughout the American military. His responses to various explosive signatures provided valuable data about canine detection capabilities that contributed to improved training protocols for future generations of explosive detection dogs. The media attention that occasionally focused on Rex's operations brought public awareness to the crucial role that military working dogs played in protecting American forces during combat operations. Coverage of his work helped build understanding of the sophisticated training and exceptional capabilities that characterized modern military animal programs, while highlighting the dangers faced by both human and canine personnel in combat zones. The bond between Rex and his handler was tested daily by conditions that would strain any relationship, yet their partnership grew stronger through shared danger and mutual dependence. Dowling's care for Rex went beyond professional responsibility to include genuine affection for an animal who had become both comrade and family member. Rex's apparent loyalty to Dowling was demonstrated through his consistent performance under stress and his obvious comfort when working with his chosen human partner. The retirement planning for Rex began long before the end of his combat deployment, as military officials recognized that dogs who had served in combat zones required specialized care during their transition to civilian life. The psychological effects of prolonged exposure to combat stress, combined with the physical demands of explosive detection work, necessitated careful planning for his eventual adoption and civilian adjustment. The homecoming that marked the end of Rex's combat deployment was an emotional milestone for both dog and handler, as they transitioned from the life-or-death environment of combat operations to the relative safety of military bases in the United States. The adjustment required careful management of both psychological and physical factors that had been shaped by months of high-stress operations in hostile territory. The adoption process that eventually united Rex with Corporal Dowling in civilian life represented the successful culmination of military programs designed to ensure that combat veterans, both human and canine, received appropriate care after their service. The legislation that facilitated these adoptions recognized the special bonds formed between military working dog teams and the importance of maintaining these relationships after military service ended. The civilian life that Rex began after his military retirement included adjustment to an environment completely different from the structured, high-stress world of combat operations. His new home provided safety and comfort, but the transition from military working dog to family pet required patience and understanding from handlers who recognized the special needs of combat veterans. The legacy of Sergeant Rex extends far beyond his individual service record to encompass broader questions about the role of military working dogs in modern warfare and the responsibilities that military organizations have toward animals who serve in combat. His career demonstrated that properly trained and handled military working dogs could be effective force multipliers in complex combat environments, while building bonds with human personnel that lasted far beyond their military service. The training programs that incorporated lessons learned from Rex's deployment helped prepare future generations of explosive detection teams for the challenges of combat operations in hostile environments. His experience provided valuable insights into the psychological and physical demands of military working dog operations that influenced policies and procedures throughout the American military. Today, when military working dogs deploy to combat zones around the world, they carry forward capabilities and training protocols that were refined through the service of dogs like Rex, who proved their worth in the most dangerous environments. His story reminds us that military effectiveness often depends on partnerships that transcend species boundaries, and that the bonds forged in combat can provide strength and purpose that last a lifetime. The German Shepherd who walked point through the triangle of death proved that courage, dedication, and loyalty are qualities that can save lives regardless of the species that possesses them.